Chapter 46. The Gods' Scheme. It was midday. Sunlight poured over the main keep of House Targaryen, draping the ancient stone walls in a soft golden glow. Aegon stirred slowly from the bed. Warm, brilliant sunlight streamed through the tower window, its dazzling brightness like an unseen hand pulling him out of slumber. He blinked drowsily and opened his eyes. A tingling numbness spread across his body, and a dull ache throbbed in his lower back. Flashes of the wild indulgence from the previous night surfaced in his mind. Something's not right. Daenerys usually pulled him into her dreams to help him recover. She was always the one who woke first, then gently roused him. But today, she still lay beside him, fast asleep. Aegon glanced over, confused. The thin sheet covering Daenerys had slipped slightly with his movement, revealing the elegant lines of her collarbone and the pale skin beneath, still bearing faint traces of their passion, soft red marks like plum blossoms blooming on snow. He raised a hand and gently patted her hip. Smack, smack, the sound sharp and distinct in the quiet room. Daenerys, what's going on? He called softly. But she didn't move, didn't even stir. It was as if she had fallen into a deep, impenetrable sleep, unmoved by his voice. A jolt of unease struck Aegon's heart. Something's wrong. Was she attacked? Daenerys possessed formidable spiritual strength, far beyond that of ordinary people. There was no way she'd sleep this deeply unless something was very, very wrong. He quickly ran through the possibilities. Who would have the motive to target the wife of a dragonlord? And more importantly, who could overpower Daenerys in the dream world, where she held the gift of the Dream Lord? The answer, once formed, was self-evident. Aegon muttered the name coldly, Pan. At that moment, knock knock. A gentle knock came at the bedroom door. Your Highness, apologies for disturbing your rest, came the familiar voice of the steward, Farlan. A group of priests claiming to be from the Church of the Night are here to see you. The Church of the Night. The Lion of Night God. Aegon frowned. Could they be connected to what happened to Daenerys? He called back, tell them I'll be in the hall shortly. Yes, Your Highness, Farlan replied and began to turn away. Wait, Farlan, Aegon called after him. Is there something else, my prince? Farlan stopped in his tracks. Aegon turned back to his desk, picked up a sheet of parchment, and wrote Aenar's name at the top. He scribbled quickly, if no confirmation letter arrives from me within 1 month, take one of my 2 children and hide them in the north of Westeros. He folded the letter, opened the door, and handed it to Farlan with a grave expression. Go to the basement. Take all 22 life seeds from the growth tanks and deliver them to Dragonstone along with this letter. You must go in person, and be extremely careful. Farlan took the letter, stunned, his voice trembling. Now, my prince. Right now. Immediately. Take every precaution, leave discreetly, stay hidden, especially when boarding the ship. Yes, Your Highness. Farlan bowed deeply, then turned and rushed away without hesitation. Aegon watched him go, not moving until his silhouette disappeared completely. Then he summoned a maid in Ilya, instructing Ilya to take good care of the still sleeping Daenerys. With the maid's help, he bathed, dressed, and prepared himself before stepping out of the room. In the main hall of the keep, a group of black-robed priests stood in silence. Their long robes followed the style of holy vestments, and their hoods covered their faces completely, making them appear like wraiths lingering in the dim hall. At the center of the group stood a long, jet-black wooden box. Aegon entered from the left, face stern, his massive greatsword bloodflame in hand. He climbed the steps and seated himself on the high seat, resting one hand on the armrest while the other gripped the sword. His cold gaze locked onto the priests. The tension in the room was suffocating. Even the air seemed to still. His fingers lightly traced the Valyrian steel hilt, as if ready to rise and strike at any moment. The lead priest took a step forward. From beneath his dark hood came a low, somber voice. Prince Dragonlord, this crystal ice was prepared by the god-blessed Pan for your lady. It will preserve her body for 1,000 years without decay. You're bringing death upon yourself. Aegon erupted in fury. He leapt from the dais, blood flame raised high. The blade flared into a sweeping arc of frostbright light, slicing down toward the priest. In that instant, a crimson figure appeared out of thin air. His robes twisted like living flame, coiling around the descending blade. Aegon snarled through clenched teeth, Pan. Was this your doing? Why my wife won't wake? Pan's expression revealed nothing. It was an accident. Daenerys wandered into my dream and became trapped. Let her out. Aegon yanked his sword free of the crimson robes and growled, or your grand plan ends here. You can forget it. Dream on. Pan paused, then slowly said, preserve her physical body first. Once the plan is complete, her soul will return. I want her soul now, Aegon said icily. He raised the sword again, ready to strike. Pan stepped forward quickly, placing a hand on Aegon's arm. I'll give her to you, but you must swear to carry out the grand plan. The two stood face to face, breath mingling. Aegon stared into Pan's eyes, then slowly nodded. Pan sighed, defeated. Bring Daenerys over. Aegon ordered the maids to carry her in. Daenerys, still fast asleep, was dressed in an elegant silver and red court gown. She was gently propped in a chair and carried into the hall. Her breathing was steady, her pale face serene, as if she were simply resting, wrapped in a calm that felt almost too perfect. Seeing this, Pan raised his hand, and an invisible force enveloped Daenerys' body, lifting her gently into the air. With a subtle motion of his fingers, the wooden box placed among the priests of the Lion of Night slowly opened. Inside lay a solid block of deep blue ice, crystal clear, as though it had been formed from the coldest depths of the ocean, radiating a faint chill. Pan waved again, guiding Daenerys' body down until she rested softly atop the glimmering blue ice. He then stepped forward, placing his hand lightly on her forehead. Wisps of silver mist emerged from the void, winding and swirling like slender silver serpents as they slowly burrowed into her skin. I've already returned Daenerys' soul to her body, Pan said calmly. But she won't be able to wake up for now, not until the grand plan is set into motion. You can try using a blood mage's resonance technique. You should be able to sense her soul within. Aegon stepped up to the ice bed and activated the blood mage's resonance technique, reaching out with his spirit in an attempt to connect with Daenerys. Sure enough, after a few moments, he sensed her presence. Her soul was there, but it remained dormant. Even when he extended his own spiritual energy to touch hers, there was no response. I want her awake. Now, Aegon said with a scowl, voice laced with displeasure. This is the limit of what we can do, Pan explained patiently. Daenerys came across something forbidden within my dream. If she wakes now, she could disrupt the grand plan irreparably. So she discovered something, some hidden truth Pan doesn't want me to know. And it's tied directly to his so-called grand plan, Aegon quickly deduced. His expression darkened as his grip around Bloodflame tightened instinctively. Pan noticed and sighed quietly, already bracing for the fight he knew might come. But just as tension reached its peak, Aegon suddenly paused. His fingers loosened around the sword. He had remembered something. He could use the system item, Emerald Dream, to draw Daenerys' soul into a space under his own control. Emerald Dream. Within the void, you may create a domain exclusive to you, up to the size of a village or town. You may send your house members into it. Upon entering, all negative status effects will be removed, allowing them to become spirits. If it clears negative soul states, could that bring her back? You all can leave now, Aegon said coolly, issuing the command without a trace of politeness. Seeing Aegon's emotions settle, Pan let out a quiet sigh of relief. As his figure faded away, the priests of the Night Lion followed in silence, leaving the hall empty. Once they were gone, Aegon stepped forward and placed his finger gently on Daenerys' forehead. He activated the Emerald Dream. A soft green glow began to radiate from his fingertip, drifting outward like mist or smoke. It slowly extended, brushing over Daenerys' soul. In her unconscious state, her spirit offered no resistance, and the strange power of the Emerald Dream quietly drew it into an unknown and mysterious realm. The green light gradually faded, and silence returned to the hall. Aegon stood quietly at the edge of the crystal ice bed. He could feel it clearly. A link had been formed in his spiritual sea, connecting him to a space beyond. He focused on the link. Instantly, it felt as if his soul were pulled into a burst of brilliant green light. The world spun, and in the next moment, his consciousness arrived above a vast, unfamiliar forest. His soul floated gently in the air, adrift. All around him was an endless expanse of vibrant green mist, rolling like waves, an emerald ocean with no shore in sight. Below his feet stretched a great woodland formed entirely of weirwood trees. Fine veils of vapor drifted among the trunks, soft and shimmering like gauze, giving the entire place a surreal and otherworldly beauty, as though he had stepped into a land of myth. A strange sensation bloomed in Aegon's heart. It felt as though he were inside a game, like Minecraft, with full command over his environment. With a mere thought, he rose higher and gazed down over the mysterious realm. The forest itself wasn't vast, perhaps only 10 or so kilometers across. It floated atop the green mist, suspended in the void. The mist spread in all directions like an infinite sea of clouds, hazy and boundless. So this is the Emerald Dream. As he took in the scenery, a familiar voice suddenly called out from within the heart of the forest. Aegon looked down, and there she was. Daenerys stood on the forest grass, waving excitedly as she jumped and called out to him. Aegon! Aegon, I'm here. Daenerys, in her soul form, glowed with a soft radiance. She wore a silver and red court gown, the hem swaying gracefully with her movements like flowing flame. Her tall, slender figure and supple curves exuded the allure and elegance of a mature woman. Aegon dove toward her and embraced her tightly. You scared me to death, he whispered. How did you end up sealed inside Pan's dream? I entered it by accident, Daenerys replied, still shaken. Where are we? Wait, Aegon, you have to be careful. Pan is using you dragonlords. His so-called grand plan, it's really just a scheme to become a god. Aegon explained that they were inside a space he had created, an inner realm where heroic spirits could reside. Then the two sat together on the grass of the Heartwood forest to discuss how to deal with Pan. As Daenerys detailed everything she had learned about Pan's plan, Aegon felt a mounting headache. He had once believed the doom of Valyria was simply the result of the blood mages bringing ruin upon themselves. But now, it was clear that a host of divine powers were involved. The situation was far more complex than he'd imagined. Take today, for instance. The Church of the Lion of Night had openly backed Pan and even sent the precious crystal ice. That alone suggested Pan wasn't bluffing. Aegon drew a circle in the grass with his finger, and the two began mapping out the forces entangled in the doom of Valyria. The known parties involved in the grand plan were: first, the Blood Mages led by the Dragonlord Council, including Aegon himself. They had been lured in by Pan's promise of immortality, unwitting pawns in a much larger scheme. Second, Pan. His stated goal was to eliminate the star god beyond the stars, freeing the Valyrian people from their spiritual corruption, and, in doing so, to seize godhood for himself. Third, the star god beneath Bloodsource Peak. This foreign deity, whose body had fallen from the heavens in a meteorite, seemed to lie at the center of the entire plan. Its true purpose remained unknown, but everything revolved around it. Fourth, the native gods of the world, like the Lion of Night, who had apparently allied with Pan to execute the grand plan and oppose the alien god. As Daenerys narrated, Aegon used his finger to section off the circle into smaller parts, each representing a different faction. Daenerys picked up a twig and, without hesitation, scratched out the part representing the Blood Mages. The Dragonlord Council got the worst of it. On the surface, they're just like ordinary Valyrians, but they've been used. What about Pan and the native gods? They look like they're working together, but I don't buy it. There's no way the plan is that simple, Aegon said, tapping Pan's piece of the diagram. If Pan's being used too, Daenerys murmured, then maybe the real conflict is between the gods of this world and the gods from beyond the stars. We don't have enough information. This is all we can piece together for now, Aegon said, brushing away the circle with his foot in frustration. Daenerys looked up at him. So, what will you do? Should we flee Valyria while we still can? There's no escaping, Aegon said, shaking his head. Tiamat is still trapped in the abyssal pit. And the gods, and Pan, now a demigod, are watching me. I can only make my move when the grand plan is actually set in motion. He leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to Daenerys' forehead. Don't worry. I've got a few ideas already. I will make him pay for what he did to you. As their lips parted, Daenerys gave a small nod. I don't think I can leave this Emerald Dream, but I can still channel my powers through your body. Maybe I'll be able to help you when the time comes. Aegon nodded as well, holding her close. Don't be afraid. I swear, I'll bring you back. Hearing that, Daenerys nestled into his arms and slowly closed her eyes. In the real world, Aegon opened his eyes. A quiet seriousness filled his gaze. He leaned over, gently brushing his fingers across Daenerys' pale cheek as she lay on the crystal ice bed. He let out a quiet sigh. Then he called for a servant. Go stop Steward Farlan. Hurry, don't let him get too far. The servant bowed and rushed out. Soon after, he returned with Farlan, who had already disguised himself and was about to depart. Aegon looked at him and felt a warmth in his chest. His house still had loyal, dependable men. He stepped forward, took back the letter he had given Farlan, and said, things have changed. There's no need to go to Dragonstone anymore. The crisis has been temporarily averted. Thank you. My prince, it's my duty to serve House Targaryen with my life. No thanks needed, Farlan replied calmly, bowing respectfully. Aegon nodded slightly at that, then reached out and helped the old steward to his feet, offering a few words of encouragement. Have Daenerys and the ice bed moved to the master tower bedroom. Be careful, don't let anything get scratched or bumped. Once everything was arranged, Aegon made his way alone to the Targaryen dragon pit. As he stepped inside, the thick scent of sulfur from the dragons hit him at once. He walked straight to Dreamshade's lair. Dreamshade, a relatively docile dragon, chirped affectionately at the sight of him. Aegon smiled and slowly approached, raising his hand. Silver dream energy, Daenerys' power, began to swirl around his palm. As the silver mist clung to his hand, he touched Dreamshade's smooth, glass-like scales. Dreamshade was a normal dragon, unlike Tiamat, whose lifespan had been shortened by her own unique gifts. Still young by dragon standards, Dreamshade was barely a few decades old. Sensing something odd, Dreamshade tilted its head. Though Aegon stood before it, the spiritual energy it felt was unmistakably Daenerys. Aegon climbed the rope ladder and settled into the saddle on Dreamshade's back. The dragon showed no resistance. Because Daenerys, using her dream powers, had projected her spirit into the physical world, successfully forming a psychic bond with her dragon. Dreamshade, out of the dragon pit. Aegon called out in High Valyrian. Law. Dreamshade responded with a cry and moved according to Aegon's command. As it stepped out of the dragon pit, the 30-meter-long dragon spread its powerful wings and slowly rose into the sky. It was Aegon's first time riding someone else's dragon, but with Daenerys' spiritual power assisting him, controlling Dreamshade felt nearly the same as riding his own Tiamat. Dreamshade flew with grace and agility, completely unlike Tiamat's heavy, powerful flight. It could easily perform intricate maneuvers, even a full 720-degree spin midair wouldn't have been difficult. But Aegon didn't attempt anything that risky. Under his control, Dreamshade seemed unusually excited, like a cat sneaking out behind its master's back. Aegon guided it steadily upward, and before long, they were soaring into the thin air high above. He circled Dreamshade around the massive formation that covered the Valyrian Peninsula, hoping to find some kind of clue, anything that might help him. As he surveyed the formation from above, Aegon noticed that many of the critical energy nodes were marked by temples, each dedicated to a different god. These shrines were positioned at key points in the formation, and even in remote, desolate areas where no one ever visited, temples had been constructed. Clearly, these weren't built for worshippers. Are these temples part of Pan's plan? Or are the gods doing this behind his back? Aegon wondered. After flying nearly halfway around the peninsula, he could find nothing else of value. Disappointed, he turned Dreamshade back toward the Targaryen hills. In the days that followed, life for Aegon seemed to settle back into a familiar rhythm. He spent his time studying blood sorcery, experimenting with bloodline synthesis techniques, and staying close to Daenerys, who was nearing childbirth. Eventually, Aegon gave in to Ilya's persistent coaxing and allowed her to eat meat. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, half a year went by. Daenerys gave birth to another daughter, whom Aegon named Elenay. He didn't rush to send the newborn to Dragonstone, still debating whether to send Daenerys' body along with her. Another 4 years slipped by. One day, Aegon flew out of the abyssal pit on Dreamshade's back. He had just finished practicing blood mage resonance techniques with Tiamat, though they'd started a little late. Now the sky was completely dark. As Aegon and Dreamshade emerged from the chasm, they were greeted by a sky full of glittering stars. Aegon gazed up at the starlit heavens. Suddenly, a thought crossed his mind. What if I tried resonating with the stars themselves? Or even, the star god buried deep at the bottom of the abyss? How fast would my spiritual power grow then? Would I go mad the instant I tried resonating with an outer god? Startled by his own reckless idea, Aegon quickly forced the thought from his mind. Dreamshade was flying in the direction beyond the 14 flames when something on the ground caught Aegon's attention. A massive bonfire gathering, with tens of thousands of people. It pulled him out of his thoughts. He quickly ordered Dreamshade to activate its mimicry scales, cloaking them in shadow, and they quietly approached the gathering. Looking down, Aegon realized the crowd consisted of ragged, poorly dressed mining slaves. Ah, he remembered now. There was a burning steel mine nearby, operated by House Eddarian. Burning steel was a crucial material used in forging Valyrian steel, but it was incredibly difficult to extract and extremely rare. During smelting, the loss was immense, often a ton of ore was needed to produce just a single kilogram of finished Valyrian steel. A booming wave of prayers echoed up from the ground. Though not perfectly unified, Aegon could make out some of the chants. You are the embodiment of all things, the weaving of light and shadow, the union of mercy and judgment. All men must die. All men must serve. ... Aegon sighed softly and turned Dreamshade away from the gathering. The many-faced god, the gods' influence over Valyria has already reached this level. They flew past the dazzling lights of Valyria's capital, then returned to the Targaryen dragon pit. As Aegon dismounted, he found Steward Farlan waiting just outside. The old man stepped forward and brushed the dust from Aegon's shoulders, then gave his report. Prince, the Dragonlord Council issued an order today. All dragonriders stationed outside the Freehold are to return immediately, with their dragons. So the grand plan is finally about to begin, Aegon thought. He turned to Farlan and said, ignore it. The Targaryens aren't part of that. Understood, Farlan replied with a nod. A few days later, the tide rose again in the Targaryen Bay. Taking advantage of the high water, ships were able to enter the harbor. Aegon had arranged for a vessel to carry his family away from the Valyrian Peninsula. Along with them, he placed Dany's body and her ice bed onto a cargo ship. If they waited any longer, they might never get the chance to leave. According to the agreement between Aegon and the 14 Dragon Pillars, Valyria would go into full lockdown during the final 5 years before the Grand Plan's activation, no one allowed out. Only entry, no exit. At such a sensitive time, Aegon dared not risk sending Aenar riding Balerion to retrieve the family. What if they couldn't make it back? Before his 2 wives boarded the ship, Daenerys, through the Emerald Dream, used her innate septon of restraint abilities to suppress their physical desires completely. Aegon stood again on the seaside cliff overlooking Targaryen Bay, watching as his family waved to him from the ship's stern. He couldn't help but feel a sting of sorrow deep in his chest. Once, the 4 of them had stood here dreaming about the future. Now, he stood alone, watching them depart. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon comp BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 7 comments 0 vote. Chapter 47. The whole house ascends, at this very moment. As the moment for the Grand Plan's launch drew ever closer, the Valyrian Peninsula had entered a state of semi-military control. In the heart of the Freehold, slave miners who worshipped the many-faced god had begun a massive excavation project in the Valyrian mountains. Groups of fanatical followers bustled about like ants, digging trenches one after another atop the sacred 14 flames. In response to public objections, the Dragonlord Council brushed them aside with vague claims that it was merely the second phase of the 14 Flames development. Those privy to the truth of the Grand Plan understood all too well, what was unfolding was merely the final stage of perfecting the source alchemy array. Not only had the surface of the 14 Flames been thrown into chaos, but even the intricate network of mine shafts, originally carved out for the extraction of burning steel, had been interconnected and repurposed as part of the alchemy array. For thousands of years, Pan and the Dragonlord Council had used mining as a cover to quietly inscribe the array's patterns into the inner structure of the 14 Flames. Every action proceeded in an orderly manner, fully under the control and will of the Dragonlord Council. The Council's summons had stirred countless wanderers outside the Valyrian Peninsula to return to their homeland. Seated atop the dome of House Targaryen's main fortress, Aegon gazed into the distance and saw scenes of daily celebration playing out both inside and beyond Valyria. Wealthy merchants and nobles who had returned seemed eager to flaunt their riches, as if reveling in the glory of their triumphant return home. In the gladiatorial arenas on the city's outskirts, savage duels raged without pause, day and night. It seemed as though Valyria's slave stockpiles, accumulated over millennia, were being exhausted within just a few years. The brutal and bloody scenes of slaves being used up were almost unbearable to witness. Yet, driven by the influence of the gods they worshipped, the slaves accepted the suffering inflicted upon them by the Valyrians as if it were a divine offering. Aegon sat silently atop the fortress, watching the Valyrians lose themselves in indulgence and revelry. Once again, he found himself repeating the words he'd once spoken atop Bloodsource Peak in a past life. This cruel pleasure will end in cruelty. Time marched forward without pause, and the days slipped by. Aegon's favorite pastime now was to bring a bottle of fine wine to the top of the fortress and quietly watch the Valyrians revel. When night fell, he would return to the Emerald Dream to spend time with Daenerys. Research into the bloodline synthesis technology had come to a temporary halt. Aegon's remaining destiny points were few, and he needed to reserve several hundred to deal with any unforeseen events that might arise when the doom arrived. Previously, when his youngest daughter departed, she had taken the 22 life seeds with her. Aegon had solemnly warned them, unless the family was facing a true life or death crisis, those life seeds must not be used. They contained Tiamat's life code talent, and their side effects were severe. Amid the eager anticipation of the 14 dragon pillars, the long-awaited day of the Grand Plan's activation finally arrived. On a cliff overlooking the bay of House Targaryen, Aegon was in the process of sending Dreamshade away. Using the mental power of her dream ability, Daenerys issued a command for Dreamshade to keep flying west. Aegon watched as Dreamshade flew into the distance, uncertain whether it would succeed in reaching the far-off Dragonstone. After descending the cliff, Aegon boarded a carriage driven by his elderly steward, Farlan. Even now, Pan's attitude toward Aegon remained ambiguous. It had started when Aegon sent his family to sea. Pan had noticed that Daenerys' soul was no longer on the ice bed. Then, when he saw Aegon's ability to ride Dreamshade, a feat far from ordinary, Pan began to suspect that Aegon had discovered his secret. But the grand plan was already in motion, there was no turning back. Aegon's seemingly compliant behavior had caused Pan to lower his guard slightly, and thus, no further conflict arose between them. As the carriage traveled down the road, the occasional corpse of a slave laborer could be seen lying by the roadside, while numerous Valyrian vagrants wandered aimlessly. With the Valyrian Peninsula's territorial waters sealed off for nearly 5 years, the people's livelihoods had inevitably suffered. Merchant guilds that once depended on exporting goods to the eastern continent of Essos had since collapsed and gone bankrupt. The Dragon's Treasure Guild, once run by Aegon, had been quietly relocated to Marine, a free city in Slaver's Bay. All other branches of the guild had been cut, leaving only the slave trade, now entirely managed by the loyal steward, Ramon. Ramon answered only to the head of House Targaryen. The Dragon's Treasure Guild had become a family asset of the Targaryens. Aenar was now relying on the slaves brought by Ramon to accelerate the construction of Dragonstone. The carriage rolled slowly into Valyria, where the city still retained its former grandeur, crowded and vibrant as ever. With the immense economic foundation it had built up over thousands of years, the Freehold seemed more than capable of weathering a few years of isolation with little difficulty. As the carriage continued on, they passed through the Freedom Shield in the northern district and entered the region surrounding the 14 Flames. Waiting as promised at the entrance to the 14 Flames was Talasia, the female knight who rode a white King-Tie dragon. She sat quietly, awaiting their arrival. Ever since Aegon's wives had departed over the past few years, nearly all of the destiny points he had earned came from missions carried out alongside this woman named Talasia. Aegon climbed into the saddle of Talasia's dragon, then gave a gentle wave to his old steward Farlan before flying off. Farlan stood watching as the last member of House Targaryen disappeared from sight, and a tear slipped from the corner of his eye. In truth, from Aegon's subtle hints, and from Daenerys' dragon dreams, he had long since pieced together the fate awaiting Valyria. Today, Farlan had deliberately donned a fresh butler's uniform. After dutifully serving Aegon on this final journey, he would return to the main stronghold of House Targaryen, close his eyes, and quietly await the end. The White King-Tie dragon soared through the peaks of the 14 Flames. Looking down, Aegon saw that the Valyrian mountains had been completely ravaged by the slave miners. Crisscrossing rune-carved trenches stretched across the mountains like glaring, open wounds. And that didn't even account for the mines deep within the mountains, now fully connected into one massive network. The entire mountain range was scarred and devastated beyond recognition. Seeing Aegon's gaze fixed on the ruined trenches, Talasia let out a light laugh. Digging out those trenches wouldn't have been possible without help from the many-faced god. He lured those slaves into working themselves to death, literally. Just during excavation alone, more than 1 million died. Back then, even when we lashed them with whips, we couldn't get the slave miners to lift a finger. Just goes to show, faith really is a strange and powerful thing. Aegon simply shook his head. Something even stranger is about to begin. Talasia knew he was referring to the grand plan and burst into laughter. Ha ha. We true dragons may not be able to achieve immortality like you dragon pillars, but just by extracting dragon blood from the common Valyrians, we'll get to live for several hundred more years. That's one hell of a profit. Aegon just smiled faintly and shook his head again. Before long, they arrived at the deep pit abyss. The place had undergone a drastic transformation. Numerous steel pipelines had been newly installed, stretching outward through the ruined trenches, twisting and turning into the distance as if without end. The inner pipelines, meanwhile, extended straight down into the depths of the abyss. Once the white dragon landed outside the blood-source abyss, Aegon dismounted and joined Talasia on a specially constructed slide, descending slowly into the abyss together. After dropping several thousand meters, Aegon stepped off the slide and found himself once more in the banquet tower where he had previously met with the council members. He pushed open the door of the Blackstone Tower and entered the banquet hall, which was as lavish and decadent as ever. The 14 council members, or rather, the dragon pillars, were in high spirits, raising their glasses and toasting each other in a lively, raucous atmosphere. As soon as Aegon stepped in, the head of House Eddarian let out a hearty laugh, holding 2 glasses filled with deep crimson wine, and strode directly to the door. Aegon reached out and took one of the blood-red goblets. Cheers. Clink. With a clear chime, the 2 men downed their drinks in a single gulp. At that moment, Pan's figure emerged at the front of the banquet hall. His expression was solemn as he declared. The source alchemy array is now fully excavated. The true dragons have returned to the peninsula. The time has come for our bloodline to ascend. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon comp BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 8 comments 0 vote. Chapter 48. Doom. For the grand plan, for eternal life. The Dragon Pillar counselors raised their goblets of blood-red wine high, faces alight with excitement, and downed the contents in one swift motion. Then, with a crash, crystal goblets were hurled to the ground, shattering across the banquet hall as the sound echoed through the vast chamber. Pan gave a slight nod to the group, then took the lead, striding toward the metal hall prepared for ascension. Aegon and the 14 dragon pillars followed closely behind. As they walked through the exhibit hall carved into the cavern, the head of House Aurelian gave a bitter smile. With the freehold closed off these past few years, our hard-won colonies, like Slavers Bay, the Free Cities, the Rhoyne Basin, and Andalos, have all begun hesitating and delaying the tributes ordered by the council. But at least, we've finally made it to the end. The head of House Elanus nodded in agreement, a trace of weariness on his face. And things aren't exactly stable at home, either. The slaves, driven mad by divine influence, are working themselves to death, but the gods, oracles are telling them to dig Valyria's grave. Many Valyrian citizens have become openly hostile toward the churches of the gods. The tension is at a breaking point. Even some of the dragon riders are disgruntled, resentful about being confined to the Valyrian Peninsula. They're not exactly swayed by the council's promises of extended life. House Aurelian had been responsible for foreign affairs, House Elanus for domestic matters, both had clearly borne immense pressure in recent years. Then the head of House Eddarian suddenly spoke up, his voice trembling slightly as he turned to Pan. Elder, can the grand plan really succeed? Have you had any new dragon dreams lately? I don't mean to question the plan. I just want to be sure. The group froze at once. Every eye turned to Pan's crimson robes. Aegon also paused, then muttered under his breath, Pan is a dragon dreamer too. A memory flashed through his mind, Aenar's treasured dragonbone dagger. When Aenar had received his eldest son Rhaegar, he mentioned the dagger had been gifted by an elder. At the time, Aegon had been surprised to learn that was how the Targaryens had acquired such a relic. Now, a chill swept through him. Could the prophecy engraved on Aenar's dagger be true? Would the prophesied prince, or princess, really appear and fulfill the so-called Song of Ice and Fire? Beside him, the head of House Aurelian leaned closer, covering his mouth and whispering, Pan was the first dragon dreamer. He foresaw the rise of our bloodline, and this grand plan. Aegon, startled, kept his voice low as he asked, did he foresee the doom? The head of House Aurelian acted as if he hadn't heard, covering his mouth with a cough. Pan had turned to glance back at them. His wrinkled face shifted slightly, and his violet eyes landed on Aegon, piercing, as if weighing and measuring him. The gaze made Aegon's heart race. Is he warning me? Pan's expression hardened, his voice ringing out firm and clear. There is no doom. The grand plan will succeed. The prophecy's outcome remains unchanged. Then, without hesitation, he turned back and resumed his steady march, leading the dragon pillars forward like a shepherd guiding his flock. Aegon frowned. He didn't believe him. A question stirred in his mind. Why would Pan lie? If he had truly foreseen the doom of Valyria, why push ahead with the grand plan? Unless the consequences of not acting were even more catastrophic than Valyria's destruction. Aegon recalled a conversation with Daenerys. Dragon dreamers like her, when faced with a disaster they foresaw, would try to prevent it. And if it couldn't be stopped, they would take the path of least sacrifice. So what could possibly be worse than the fall of Valyria? Human extinction. The end of the world. Aegon didn't know, but he was nearly certain that whatever it was, it involved the gods, or the entities from beyond the stars. Only those two forces held such overwhelming power. In that vast, majestic hall, shadowed with an eerie gloom, Pan walked on ahead like a leader marching his people toward the edge of annihilation, with the Dragonlord Council and the people of Valyria trailing close behind. Half an hour later, the group finally reached the metal hall. At Pan's instruction, the 14 dragon pillars and Aegon each took their designated seats. The chairs were covered in intricate metal tubing, twisting like mysterious metallic vines. A faint mechanical hum rose in the air. Suddenly, with a sharp click, metal clasps hidden in the armrest snapped shut, locking tightly around their wrists. Thick metal arms extended from the backrests, wrapping around their torsos, coiling tighter and tighter. Beneath their seats, heavy metal plates slowly rose, clamping firmly around their legs and securing them in place. The dragon pillars' expressions turned uneasy, their bodies shifting restlessly in their restraints. Pan raised a calming hand and spoke with practiced ease. These restraints are only to prevent you from thrashing during the ascension process. Any sudden movement could interrupt the transmission of the immortal substance. After all, ascension is not a pleasant experience, but I trust you've all prepared yourselves for this. Hearing his reassurance, the dragon pillars slowly stopped struggling. The tension in the hall began to ease. Seeing that everyone had calmed down, Pan stepped up beside Aegon and addressed the group. Everyone, I will become the core of the Source Alchemy Array and oversee its activation and operation. My life force has been completely exhausted, I can no longer absorb immortal matter. So, under the array's effects, my soul will transform into a ghost-like life form, granting me a different form of rebirth. This, for all of us, is a win-win. The head of House Eddarian smiled with anticipation. Elder, please begin, I can't wait any longer. The other dragon pillars echoed the sentiment. Begin it. Let us be reborn with the Elder. Pan gave a faint smile, slowly pressed both hands downward, and then rose steadily toward the dome of the metal hall. Aegon, like the others, looked up. This was the first time he had seen such an expression on Pan's face. Until now, Pan had always seemed more like a cold, emotionless machine. A massive, pure white crystal orb was embedded in the dome above. As Pan's crimson figure touched the crystal, his form instantly melted into a pool of liquid red, slowly seeping into the sphere. In moments, the entire crystal turned blood red, like an eye soaked in fresh blood. Pan's voice resonated from all corners of the hall, echoing through the vast chamber. The first phase of the Source Alchemy Array will trigger a massive explosion. All dragon blood from the Valyrians will be extracted and drawn into the 14 flames. This metal hall is the only safe place on the Valyrian Peninsula. Once the first phase is complete, the dragon blood will be guided by the array's magic to the base of Blood Source Peak, where it will enter the pureblood dragon formation built from King dragons. Then, the true second phase of ascension will begin. As Pan spoke, his overlapping voices sounded almost otherworldly. The metal hall began to glow red. Blood mage runes flared to life, branching out across the walls like veins on leaves, pulsing with an eerie crimson light. A low hum filled the hall, soft at first, but steadily growing louder. Energy pulsed through the structure as the entire chamber began to tremble. Pan's face became visible again within the redlit crystal embedded in the dome. In the second phase, the pureblood dragon formation will activate. It will draw out the Dragonlord's bestial essence and purify it using human dragon blood. Once divinity is restored, it will be transported up from the abyss, that's when true ascension begins. As his final words rang out, Aegon felt the tremors intensify rapidly. His body shook violently in sync with the hall. The unpadded metal seat beneath him made every jolt unbearable, he felt like he was going to be rattled apart. The entire spherical metal chamber was slowly lifted by mechanical gears and began to slide along a massive overhead rail, moving steadily toward the center of the abyss. As the hull left its position, the adjacent exhibition cavern began to collapse. Tens of thousands of crystal vessels shattered from the tremors, ringing out in sharp cracks. Dragon beast specimens that had been preserved for millennia were suddenly exposed to open air. Separated from the yellow, unknown preservation liquid, they began to rot and decay rapidly, releasing a pungent, foul stench that spread through the collapsing chamber. But deeper inside, the giant specimens, those over 50 meters tall, did not decay at once. Instead, they stirred. As if roused from an ancient slumber, they began to slowly open their beastly, dragon-like eyes. Confusion flickered in their gazes as they scanned their surroundings. Their skin, wrinkled from millennia of immersion, began to smooth out slightly, as if in a final resurgence of life. Pan, why did you wake me early? A 100-meter-long dragon beast with massive wings let out a guttural roar in human speech, its voice echoing across the cave. What's going on? The other dragon beasts, dozens of meters long, awakened one after another, equally bewildered. Has the bloodline faced extinction? Why awaken us now? Why didn't any kin preserve us? Without the immortal preservative blood, we'll wither away the moment we're exposed. The dragon-winged creatures roared with fury, their voices shaking the cavern. Then, a thunderous crash. A massive stalactite from the cave's ceiling plunged down, striking one of the dragon beasts squarely on the head. In the next instant, the entire ceiling began to collapse. Rocks and boulders as large as buildings fell like an avalanche. Within moments, they buried the newly awakened dragon beasts beneath tons of stone. Agonized wails echoed briefly, then fell silent as the creatures were crushed and entombed deep underground. Still, one dragon beast roared defiantly as it died. I won't accept this, I don't want to die. Boom. The entire cavern collapsed completely, wiping away every trace of the blood mage's remaining experiments. Suspended in the center of the abyss, the massive metal sphere continued its slow descent along the rail. Eventually, it came to rest in a large recess at the top of a towering steel spire. With a heavy metallic click, the sphere locked into place, linking perfectly with the pipes from the pureblood dragon formation below. Then, the top of the sphere began to open, petal by petal, like a steel flower blooming. Pan's blood-red crystal core floated free from its cradle, rising gently into the air. Streams of crimson energy flowed from it, thin and agile like silk threads, linking to the tips of each metal petal. As the exhibition cavern collapsed behind them, the cliffs surrounding the abyss also began to break apart. Countless rocks tumbled downward in a storm of destruction. Some stray stones veered toward the blooming metal platform, but each one was repelled by Pan's powerful magical barrier. Still, the impact was enough to cause the towering metal spire beneath them to sway violently. Aegon looked up at Pan, concerned. Can the tower beneath this platform withstand the impact? The platform rocked so fiercely, he felt as though he were atop a skyscraper during a magnitude 7 earthquake. Pan's tone remained calm. Don't worry. The core of the source alchemy array is made entirely of Valyrian steel. The Freehold's entire stockpile, centuries of accumulation, is concentrated here. Aegon's eyes widened in shock. The collapse of the abyss showed no signs of stopping. Here and there, he saw buildings, black stone towers from the floating cities, and even the massive corpses of King dragons, all plunging into the depths below. He looked up toward the immense opening at the top of the abyss and felt a strange sense of insignificance. Like a frog trapped at the bottom of a well. Above him, the round sky was darkened by thick black smoke. Ash fell like snow, blanketing the sky in a suffocating curtain. If one were to lift their gaze from the metal platform and continue rising, they would see the rune-carved ravines across the Valyrian mountains gradually filling with surging red magic. The source of this power came from Pan and the hundreds of god temples scattered across the Valyrian Peninsula. Deep within the ravines, veins of dragonglass conducted the flow of energy, providing a constant and unrelenting stream of support. All the mountains within a 500-mile radius of Valyria began to tremble violently at the same moment. It was as if a chain of volcanoes had erupted all at once, blazing black smoke and scorching flames spewed into the sky, churning with rolling ash, thick smoke, and relentless fire. The skies above twisted into a maelstrom of chaos, black smoke and fire swirling like mad spirits in a death dance. Fused into these flames was the overwhelming absorption magic of the source alchemy array. The smoke and fire, like the tendrils of some malevolent demon, reached out and ensnared every living being on the Valyrian Peninsula. Within seconds of contact, countless Valyrians were reduced to nothing but blackened ash, life itself rendered utterly powerless before this monstrous force. Talasia stared in despair at the apocalyptic spectacle above. Only now did she realize the truth: she had been deceived by Pan and the Dragonlord Council. In a panic, she spurred her King dragon upward, desperate to escape this hellish domain. But the raging, suffocating smoke had already formed a solid, impenetrable ceiling, sealing off the entire Valyrian sky. Across the peninsula, thousands of dragonriders reacted just as Talasia had. They too fought to flee from death's grip, but the all-consuming smoke and fire incinerated their dragons mid-flight, one by one. Desiccated dragon corpses fell from the sky like shooting stars, countless, horrifying, and grotesque. Even the thousands of wild, untamed dragons scattered across Valyria were nearly wiped out in the same instant, swallowed by the inferno. The smoke and fire behaved like an insatiable demon, devouring all life in its path. It swept across the land without mercy, extinguishing every spark of vitality from the once flourishing Valyrian Peninsula and reducing it to a lifeless ruin. Tens of millions of people perished in an instant, their true dragon blood forcibly extracted by the array. It all happened too fast. No time to react. No time to run. No chance to survive. Just moments before, the Valyrians had been celebrating, reveling in pleasure and power, and the next, they were gone. Obliterated in smoke and flame. The cruelty of fate could not have been more brutal. The inland lakes boiled away under the searing heat, or turned into steaming, acidic pools that reeked of death. Trees in the deep forests withered within seconds, leaving behind nothing but barren silence where once lush green canopies had stood. Billions of beasts perished in the catastrophe. Their final cries lingered in the air, only to be drowned out by the roaring blaze. The source alchemy array continued to erupt. When the veins of dragonglass buried deep in the mines were fully activated, the land itself began to rupture violently, cracking apart like the end of the world had come. The ground, torn open by the array, split into vast maws, bloody, jagged chasms that swallowed Valyria's proud palaces, cities, and settlements whole. Entire structures collapsed in an instant, vanishing into the abyss below. But from some of the fissures flowed not lava, but strange, pulsing purple blood. And in their wake, glistening, severed tendrils were blown up from the depths by explosive surges of dragonglass. At some unknown point, the flesh of the star gods had already begun to spread beyond the sinkhole. At the energy nodes of the source alchemy array, where the temples of the gods stood tall, brilliant bursts of divine light erupted the moment the star gods' blood surfaced. The gods' radiance reached downward, greedily drawing in the violet ichor, as if fighting to seize control of this unfathomable, potent source of power. At the bottom of the abyss, where Aegon and the dragon pillars were stationed, a furious, earth-shaking roar suddenly erupted, one that seemed to embody boundless wrath and unimaginable terror. This, is that a star god? Aegon's heart pounded wildly under the weight of the roar's overwhelming force. The sound resembled a dragon's bellow, but it was 100-fold more savage. The sheer fury in it struck Pan's red, translucent barrier with such violence that ripples surged across its surface, as though it might shatter like brittle glass at any moment. Pan clenched his will, straining to keep the shield intact. Meanwhile, the smoke and flame that had devoured all life in Valyria surged along the runic trenches like a crimson tide, flooding toward the sinkhole abyss. Without hesitation, it funneled into the Valyrian steel pipelines stretching out from the depths. Dragon blood has returned. Gods, receive my grand offering. Pan's bloodhood visage cackled with manic glee. He began to overdrive the array. The sudden surge of magic pushed far beyond what dragonglass could withstand. In an instant of frantic acceleration, the entire source alchemy array detonated. Part of Valyria's crust ruptured in a catastrophic blast. Molten magma from the planet's core erupted like an enraged beast, unleashing a second, even more violent wave of destruction, an apocalyptic chain reaction that continued to spew with unstoppable fury. Hundreds of god temples, constructed at the array's key energy nodes, were the first to be annihilated. Some were shattered outright by the erupting magma. Others, sturdier but no less doomed, were hurled skyward in molten blasts, reduced to grotesque, flaming fragments that rained back down in surreal destruction. The already shattered land gave way completely. Cracks widened into massive, bottomless chasms, swallowing entire portions of the Valyrian Peninsula. Massive swaths of earth began to sink. Torrents of seawater surged inward like a dam broken beyond repair, flooding the sunken lands and submerging them. The explosion fractured the terrain around Valyria into countless fragmented islands, wiping out the continent's former geography in a single, brutal stroke. Even the lands of the Long Summer, located on the fringe of the Freehold, were not spared. Towns and villages were buried under volcanic ash cast off from the eruption. Although the magical flames from the source alchemy array never reached them, the fallout, lava, ash, and shock, turned the land into a scorched disaster zone. Worse still, a colossal shockwave triggered by the rupturing earth swept outwards. Tsunamis rose behind it like rampaging beasts, crashing toward the long summer lands with merciless force. Boom. Following in the wake of the shockwaves and tidal surges came an endless series of thunderous detonations, expanding outward from the Valyrian Peninsula, as if the very world itself were being shaken apart. Hurricane winds howled across the scarred landscape, bringing with them devastation beyond imagination. Everything in their path, cities, forests, people, was devoured in the screaming gale. Homes crumbled like dominoes under the combined assault of earthquakes and natural calamities. Across the ruins, countless voices cried out in agony. Once thriving cities were reduced to piles of rubble, broken walls, shattered stone, and the bitter taste of despair. It was a vision of hell on earth. Above the skies of Valyria, thick clouds turned pitch black, stained by smoke and ash. The sky became a vast black curtain, heavy and suffocating. Within that darkness, lightning exploded in flashes of white silver, like vicious serpents thrashing through the clouds. Thunder crashed in wave after wave, each one louder than the last, rolling through the heavens like the furious howls of vengeful gods. Color drained from the world. Creation trembled. At the core of the 14 flames, deep in the abyss beneath the sinkhole, the massive metal platform trembled. Pan had begun the second phase of the grand plan. Now, the dragonblood of countless Valyrians surged like a raging flood, converging into the pureblood dragon formation at the bottom of the abyss. The divine blood of the star gods was slowly extracted, then injected into the colossal bodies of the 15 dragonlords. From there, it flowed through Valyrian steel tubes implanted in their hearts, pumping upward, straight into the bodies of the dragon pillars above. As golden immortal matter continued its ascent, something unnatural began to happen. Scarlet organic flesh and sinew began to grow across the outer wall of the Valyrian steel tower. The mysterious, deathless substance seemed to spark spontaneous vitality, and blood-red muscle fibers began spreading like vines. Within moments, the steel tower was completely engulfed, transformed into a massive, grotesque pillar of flesh and blood. Aegon watched in horror as the platform was swallowed by a living carpet of tissue. Then, the tubes embedded in each metal seat activated. Golden-red liquid surged through the conduits like a tidal wave, flooding into the bodies of the 15 dragon pillars. In the very instant the fluid entered his veins, Aegon felt agony unlike anything he had known. The pain ignited his nerves like fire. He could feel his body being forcibly transformed, each cell torn apart and reformed again, over and over, endlessly. The torment was blinding. Seconds passed like eternities. Then, one of them broke. The first to fail was the head of House Eddarian. Without warning, his eyeballs bulged grotesquely, then slowly sprouted into long, slender tentacles. Crawling out of their sockets like newly birthed creatures, the tentacles dangled bloody nerves behind them, which they promptly tore from the remnants of his flesh. His ears rapidly swelled and sprouted fleshy wings, then tore free of his skull, flapping madly in the air and releasing a piercing, shrill screech. His teeth sharpened into fangs, then burst from his gums, transforming into white, insect-like creatures that crawled out of his mouth and scattered into the air. His muscles twitched and writhed, each strand coming alive, twisting and morphing into squirming worms, slithering across his now unrecognizable form. Aegon stared, frozen in horror. The grotesque transformation sent chills racing down his spine, every hair on his body standing on end. What the hell is happening to him? Damn it! Aegon shouted, voice cracking as he turned to Pan in panic. Pan merely shook his head, expression cold and emotionless. His dragon was too weak. The beastly essence couldn't be purified. But once he dies, his remains will condense into blood source crystals, exactly what I need. I have no physical body anymore. I don't need to fear the interference of animalistic reawakening. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon comp BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators thoughts. 8 comments 0 vote. Chapter 49, The Dragonlord's Bloodline. The head of House Eddarian didn't even have time to scream before his body split apart, transforming into hundreds of new lifeforms. His tongue, now a living slug, slowly slithered across the metal floor and came to rest atop Aegon's foot. Only a single, crystal-clear ruby remained on the seat. It had taken his place, quietly absorbing the immortal substance flowing from the chair, glowing faintly with a cold red light. Above, the massive crystal orb that Pan inhabited suddenly flared, casting a ribbon of crimson light that coiled around the gemstone that had once been head of House Eddarian. The two began to entwine, their energies fusing together in eerie harmony. KKK, that's it, ascend now, my precious dragon pillars, Pan's twisted voice echoed from above. Cold and bone deep, it sent a chill down the spines of the remaining 14. Aegon could feel the aura of Pan's magic intensifying. It swelled and surged like waves crashing outward in every direction. The other dragon pillars, now fully realizing their fate, began to cry out for mercy. One after another, they begged Pan to spare them, but he paid them no attention. Their pleas soon turned to curses, snarled insults, and frenzied screaming. Yet none of it reached Pan's ears. He remained utterly unmoved. Beneath the metal platform, the fleshy pillar continued to grow, fed ceaselessly by the flow of immortal matter. The mindless organic mass pushed up against the underside of the platform like a sprouting seedling racing toward the sun, lifting it higher and higher. As it grew, the Valyrian steel pipes were torn apart by the swelling muscle. The exposed tissue filled in the ruptures on its own. Shaped by the pureblood formation, the flesh slowly morphed into hollow, throat-like channels that continued the transmission of immortal essence. Before long, the platform had been pushed all the way up, emerging from the depths of the sinkhole into the open air. When it finally rose to the surface, Aegon saw the devastation around the 14 flames, unleashed by the source alchemy array. It was a vision straight out of hell. Charred corpses littered the land. Some were Valyrians, others slave miners. Their bodies lay twisted and mangled, as if racked with unbearable pain in their final moments. Dragon corpses were everywhere. Bloodsource Peak, once claimed by the Dragonlord Council to be a sanctuary, had in fact been the first to fall. The Dragonriders stationed there were among the first to be consumed by the smoke and flame. Their mounts had perished alongside them, their massive bodies now rotting in the open, releasing the stench of death. The pillar of flesh still wasn't finished growing. From a tiny sprout, it had become a full sapling. Immortal substance hissed as it surged upward through the fleshy, throat-like tubes, a wet, sinister sound, like a demon's breath. Then, 2 more dragon pillars collapsed under the strain of beastly reawakening. With an explosive burst, they disintegrated into hundreds of bizarrely adorable little creatures. These fleshy insects, like newborns, seemed endlessly curious about the world around them. They crawled, hopped, and fluttered about the platform, exploring their surroundings without fear. Pan didn't stop. He reached out with more of his glowing crimson tendrils, linking to the blood crystals left behind by the collapsed council members. His shrill laughter pierced the air like a chorus of needles stabbing into everyone's ears, intensifying their agony beyond measure. The remaining 11 dragon pillars were still struggling, some screaming, some begging, some appealing to Pan's reason or shared history. Aegon watched them coldly, silently noting how none of them had given up. They were true old-world politicians, opportunists to the end, clinging desperately to any hope of survival, even at death's door. But their efforts were meaningless. As the flesh pillar grew into a monstrous tree with a trunk dozens of meters thick, the deaths of the dragon pillars only accelerated. Every minute, 1 or 2 more were lost. The insect-like creatures began swarming, their numbers growing denser. Soon they ventured beyond the platform itself. Some crawled into the skulls of the Valyrian dead, and shockingly, those desiccated corpses began to stir, rising unsteadily to their feet. Amid all this, Aegon was faring better than most. After a few minutes of being infused with immortal substance, his body began to grow stronger. Muscles bulged like forged steel, layer upon layer of dense, taut power forming beneath his skin. His bones lengthened and thickened under the influence of the immortal matter, cracking and popping audibly as they reshaped. In mere minutes, his height had climbed from 1.8 meters to 2 meters, and he was still growing. His frame stretched skyward, statuesque and sculpted like a figure carved from stone. Skin and muscle rippled with raw force, pressing against his clothes until they bulged, the seams straining with every breath, as if they might burst open at any moment. What a flawless body. If you keep absorbing like this, you might actually ascend to a demigod, Pan's voice echoed across the platform. A projection of him materialized, his gaze fixed intently on Aegon, eyes brimming with astonishment. But then he slowly shook his head, raised a finger, and pointed at Aegon with a tinge of regret. Such a shame. The human body has its limits. Even if Tiamat can perfectly filter out your beastly nature, you won't escape being torn apart in the end. This so-called ascension was a dead end from the start. No human can withstand the full essence of a god. Aegon ignored Pan's ramblings, his focus inward, locked on his status panel. Moments earlier, after breaking past the racial limit of 100 points, his vitality and mental power had triggered an upgrade to his True Dragonblood trait. True Dragonblood, Dragonlord, Charisma plus 10, Fire resistance massively increased to 300%, Mental resistance 50%, 100% chance to subdue a dragon and become a Dragon Knight. Contain multi-headed dragons, the number of dragons tamed is closely linked to mental strength. Aegon had become a true Dragonlord. Yet now, with no more dragons left alive on Valyria to tame, he couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. Boom! Another dragon pillar shattered, exploding into countless tiny lifeforms. The collapse of the dragon pillars was accelerating. Now, each one disintegrated like a bloodflesh bomb, detonating in an instant. The resulting shockwaves scattered bloodflesh insects in every direction, creating a rain of wriggling organisms beneath the metal platform. The chaos on the platform mirrored the carnage below. At the bottom of the abyss, the pillar of flesh had fully encased the area where the 15 Dragonlords had been. A colossal fleshy cocoon had formed, a grotesque egg of blood and muscle. Within it, the dragons were undergoing terrifying transformations. Unlike the dragon pillars, who violently burst apart, the Qingtier dragons that had absorbed too much beastliness didn't explode. Instead, they deflated, collapsing like ruptured sacks of flesh, their bodies slowly merging into the walls of the cocoon. One by one, the Qingtier dragons were absorbed into the pillar, except for Tiamat. Tiamat remained untouched by the assimilation. Though its eyes were tightly shut, its body kept growing, slowly pressing into the space where the other dragons had once been. As the beastly essence continued to accumulate, grotesque tumors began to bulge from Tiamat's neck. Eventually, when only Tiamat remained inside the cocoon. With a wet tear, one of the tumors split open. From it, a second dragon head, slightly smaller than the main one, emerged, struggling its way out. Now bearing a second head, Tiamat loosened its tightly clenched jaws, and the sound of its labored, monstrous breathing echoed through the fleshy egg. Up on the metal platform, Aegon noticed changes in Tiamat's attributes. In addition to the ever-increasing layers of greedy feast, Tiamat had gained a new talent, Regenerating Dragon Head. A rank, Regenerating Dragon Head. Your vital weakness is no longer limited to a single head. As long as at least one dragon head remains, your life will not end. Vitality and mental strength increase by 20% for each head, losing a head increases life recovery by 100%. Looks like Tiamat's undergoing an evolution too. Probably mutated into a multi-headed form, just like me, Aegon thought. By now, the metal platform had been lifted a full kilometer above ground, borne upward by the massive flesh pillar. The pillar itself had swelled to over 100 meters in diameter, grown from a sprouting seedling into a towering, grotesque tree. It was like a monstrous bloom rising from a mass grave, obscene in its grandeur. Only now did the pillar's ascent slow slightly. It wasn't from exhaustion. Every additional meter it lifted the platform required it to expand further in width, and that meant a greater cost in energy. At this point, Aegon was the only dragon pillar left on the platform. The other 14 counselors had all disintegrated, their remains transformed into blood-red gemstones floating above their respective seats. Pan greedily absorbed the energy from each one, like a bottomless void devouring everything in reach. A projection of Pan pointed gleefully at the bulging veins on Aegon's face, laughing hysterically. Kekeki. Unbearable, isn't it? You've really amazed me. You actually absorbed this much divine essence. Now come on, ascend. Explode. Aegon let out a cold snort. You think I'll die here? Oh, sure. You'll really become a demigod, huh? Ha ha ha. That's the best joke I've heard all century. Ha ha ha. Pan doubled over with laughter, holding his stomach with one hand, pointing at Aegon with the other, dancing like a lunatic across the fleshy platform. But Aegon ignored the madman. He parted his lips slightly, and a blood orchid appeared in his mouth. Without hesitation, he chewed the flower stem and all, swallowing it whole. Pan froze. The laughter stopped dead. His eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at Aegon, watching the bulging veins across his body slowly fade and smooth away. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon com, BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 8 comments 0 vote. Chapter 50. We are true dragons, not chattel dogs. Aegon had also received the negative S talent, though his physical transformation had yet to begin. Under the surge of powerful immortal substance, the minus sign in front of S vanished in an instant. S-Class, Life Code. Your genetic code has been shattered by a certain magical element. You will randomly gain a talent with infinite growth potential. Your race will no longer limit your evolution. You have broken the shackles of passive existence and unlocked the path of active evolution. A-Class, Ascension Stairway. You have gained immortality. Your lifespan will no longer bring death, but instead fuel your growth. With each passing year, your vitality increases by 10%. Happiness came too suddenly, Aegon thought, excitement surging through him. It felt like a leap straight into immortality. Pan was still staring at him, dazed and bewildered, clearly unsure of what had just occurred. Suppressing the rush of excitement in his chest, Aegon turned to Pan and asked, "You told Daenerys you planned to destroy the gods beyond the stars. Is that really possible? That kind of infinite source, how could humans ever hope to defeat it?" Pan frowned, but still answered. "Within this absorption array, I'll keep drawing on the outer god's power until my strength surpasses his. After countless ages, I'll be able to destroy his body with my own hands." The Targaryen dynasty had lasted barely 300 years. For ordinary mortals, such a vision was incomprehensibly distant. Only someone like Pan, an outer god's chosen, who had lived for millennia, could speak with such confidence. The pillar of flesh continued to rise slowly, reaching the same height as the 14 flames. Aegon could now clearly sense that with his current strength, he might be able to fight Pan. If he could just shatter the crystal orb that housed Pan's essence, he might have a real chance to kill him. That thought pushed Aegon to shift, lifting his hips, preparing to stand. But the moment he moved, a monstrous roar erupted from the abyss below, and the steep, mountain-sized pillar of flesh began to tremble violently. Pan immediately thrust out both palms in alarm, motioning for Aegon to stop. "Don't get off the Valyrian steel throne," he shouted. "You 15 dragon pillars are the critical energy nodes sustaining the seal on the outer god beyond the stars. Lose even one node, and the entire seal collapses. If that thing escapes the abyss, the whole world will fall into ruin." Aegon froze in place, stunned. "What did you say? The world, destroyed. That outer god is really that powerful?" Pan nodded gravely. "During the Age of Heroes, the Bloodstone Emperor of the Great Empire of the Dawn acquired only a sliver of its flesh, just like we Valyrian blood mages did. With that fragment came a trace of the outer god's twisted, forbidden knowledge. And even that was enough to earn him the wrath of the gods. What we blood mages possess now, it's far greater than what the Bloodstone Emperor ever touched. To root out the cult of the outer god and erase its corrupting knowledge, the gods waged a war that lasted thousands of years, the Long Night. Killing the Bloodstone Emperor wasn't enough. They knew the faith and the knowledge had to be purged to the root, or the outer god would one day fully descend into this world. A monster that even the gods fear. Do you really think I'm being dramatic?" Aegon's brow furrowed. "So you foresaw in a dragon dream that the gods would unleash another long night, and that's why you engineered this whole scheme. You planned to use the entire Valyrian race as a sacrifice, to seal and weaken the outer god." He snorted. "Ha! Sounds more like you were chasing your own dream of godhood." Pan looked up slightly, a hint of weariness flashing in his eyes. "It's come to this. You can believe whatever you want." With that, he slowly walked toward the edge of the metal platform, his expression tinged with melancholy. By now, the flesh pillar had risen high enough to overlook much of the peninsula. Pan stood there in silence, staring at the ruins of Valyria, at the shattered city, the fractured land. The once mighty peninsula had been reduced to broken isles, its northern arm torn into pieces by the encroaching sea. "I can't just sit in this chair forever," Aegon said. Pan didn't turn around. "If you want to end all life in this world, then go ahead. Jump off the platform right now." His voice was cold and unyielding. Aegon's lips quivered slightly. He opened his mouth but no words came out. He could only sigh heavily and, after a long moment, reluctantly sat back down in the chair. The two of them remained locked in silence atop the metal platform, time slipping by like grains of sand. Aegon's body continued to grow, stronger, taller. He was now over 3 meters high, yet there was no joy in his eyes. He kept glancing toward Pan's back, hoping, waiting, for some kind of shift. Pan stood motionless at the platform's edge, like a statue carved from ice, silently watching the devastated world beyond. As the sun and moon passed for the third time, a quiet procession of humans appeared in the ruins of Valyria, thousands strong, dressed in robes of many colors, their garments marking them as high-ranking priests. They moved like ghosts across the land, swift and agile, racing over terrain ravaged by the corruption of the outer gods. From high above, Aegon and Pan spotted them immediately. Dogs of the gods, Pan spat with venom, his face twisted in loathing. Aegon turned his head slightly, eyeing Pan with a puzzled look. Didn't you once claim to be the chosen one, favored by the gods? Why such disgust toward their priests now? Pan's expression was calm as he answered, I was never more than a partner of convenience. The gods are obsessed with eradicating the forbidden knowledge and faith tied to the outer gods, but the immortal divine essence they wield. That, both the gods and I desire. They're about to enter the 14 flames, Aegon said, eyes fixed on the rapidly advancing figures, swarming like ants across the ground. Pan sighed softly, then turned back, his gaze resolute as he looked at Aegon. I'll stop them. Don't you dare move from here. No matter what you think of me, whether I'm a selfish, power-hungry schemer, a selfless savior, or a ruthless executioner. Remember this, we are true dragons, not hounds of the gods. Aegon stared at him, speechless, mouth slightly open, unable to form a reply. His eyes were full of conflicted emotion. The crystal orb that had housed Pan's soul, hovering above all this time, slowly descended, merging silently into the avatar Pan had manifested. His figure became more solid, its surface shimmering faintly like glazed glass. Then, under Aegon's complicated gaze, Pan leapt decisively from the metal platform. A legendary, soul-shaking battle began, but Aegon couldn't see it clearly. The fight raged directly beneath the pillar of flesh, where Pan confronted the priests of the gods. Explosions thundered without pause, bursts of divine radiance flaring again and again as the gods manifested their powers. The light was so intense that even Aegon, high above, had to squint. The shockwaves from their battle shook the flesh pillar violently. Again and again, Aegon fought the urge to rise from the Valyrian steel throne, to plunge down and join Pan in this ferocious war. But every time he so much as lifted himself from the seat, the pillar beneath him convulsed violently. He could feel it, each time he shifted, a vast and terrifying force surged up from the depths of the abyss. The mental pressure pouring out was like a tidal wave, immense beyond imagination. This overwhelming force, sealed within the abyss, was desperately trying to break free. It felt, at times, as if an unspeakable eye was staring up at him from the deep, chilling him to the bone. The battle raged for a full hour. Aegon couldn't see how it unfolded, but he knew the outcome. Pan had won, but at a terrible cost. A mutilated hand, fingers missing, clawed its way up the edge of the metal platform. Pan dragged himself up with great effort. His once grand crimson robes were shredded and ruined. His body, like a cracked porcelain vessel, was riddled with fractures. He looked as if a gust of wind might shatter him entirely. Aegon could see it clearly. Embedded in Pan's translucent chest, the once brilliant blood-red crystal orb was now only half intact, and even that was covered in deep cracks, ready to shatter at any moment. The old Pan was gone. The majesty, the confidence, vanished. What remained was a dying flame, flickering weakly in the wind. A life on the brink. Aegon opened his mouth, but no words came. This old man, he had been a sage of Valyria, the architect of its destruction, and maybe, just maybe, the world's last hope. Aegon had always seen him as the final boss, the enemy he would one day have to defeat. But now, that prey had been taken from him, by the gods. Ha 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 ha. Pan suddenly threw back his head and let out a wild, mournful laugh. It echoed through the empty sky, filled with bitterness and despair. Your vessel is broken. You're dying, Aegon said softly, a slight frown on his face, eyes tinged with reluctant sympathy. Pan didn't seem to hear. He was lost in memory, murmuring to himself, do you know how I made it through these thousands of years? From the moment I obtained the blood mage's knowledge, more than 500 priests of the gods came after me. They told me, without question, that if I didn't destroy the outer god or erase its influence, the gods would bring about another long night. Humanity would be wiped out. What could I do? What would you have done? I had no choice but to destroy the Valyrian Freehold. And the Valyrians, they had no choice either. I foresaw countless futures in my dreams. Every timeline ends in one of two outcomes. Either the gods plunge the world into eternal night to destroy humanity, or the outer god escapes and destroys everything. I had no way out. I did everything I could, everything. He broke down completely, covering his face with both hands and sobbing uncontrollably. His grief was raw and devastating. The crystal orb in his chest began to crack audibly, sharp clicks and snaps, as shards flaked off and scattered across the blood-flesh carpeted platform. Pan's fate now mirrored that of the 14 dragon pillars, disintegration. Only the method differed. Aegon stood in silence for a long while, then finally said, softly. We are true dragons, not dogs. Pan's sobbing faded. Those words, like recognition, like affirmation, cut through his despair like a shaft of light. A flicker of peace returned to his eyes. At least now, he had seen the only hope left for the Valyrian people. Slowly, Pan lowered his hands, raising his cracked and broken face. With the last spark of his essence, he activated his prophetic sight one final time and looked at Aegon. And he saw a moment in the distant future. Aegon sat tall on a towering iron throne, forged from countless blades, swords, daggers, spears, all dripping with blood, radiating a chilling aura. The corpses of gods were impaled on the highest blades. The Lion of Night, the old gods, the storm god, the drowned god, the many-faced god, even the maiden maid of light. They hung there side by side, like butchered livestock, joined by bizarre and foreign gods, the great shepherd, the black goat, the three-headed god, Bacalon the pale child, and the butterfly god of Noth. Elder Pan, in that moment, wept tears of joy. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon comp BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 9 comments 0 vote. Chapter 51. A voice that strikes the soul. Pan's face carried a complicated mix of joy and sorrow. His body was shattered beyond recognition, and the cracked crystal orb embedded in his chest fell and hit the metal platform with a loud crash. Crack! The orb shattered completely, crumbling into glistening shards scattered across the floor. The shadow that had loomed over Valyria for thousands of years had finally lifted. Smiling, he passed away as his life came to an end. Aegon slowly closed his eyes, took a deep breath, then let out a heavy sigh. He looked up at the sky. Thunderclouds blanketed the Valyrian Peninsula, and thick bolts of lightning flickered within them. As the lightning flashed, Aegon's profile flickered between light and shadow. The deafening thunder roared on, as if warning mortals, this is the price of defying the gods. At this moment, the Valyrian Peninsula was devoid of life. Only a dozen or so council members remained, fleshy insect-like creatures torn from the crumbled dragon pillars. Mutilated parasitic corpses wandered aimlessly through the ruins. A week later, a fine drizzle began to fall from the dark clouds over the peninsula. Rain stirred up the ash covering the ground around the 14 flames, turning it into drifting clouds of miasma that floated through the mountains, sealing off all paths in and out of the area. Perhaps due to the influence of the unknown sealing array beneath him, Aegon discovered that his soul could no longer pass through the green passage in his mind to return to the Emerald Dream. Like an outer god, he was now trapped in the 14 flames. Aegon was the only living being left in the 14 flames, spending each day among the wandering corpses. The monotonous and lifeless days nearly drove him to madness. A lingering loneliness clung to him like a shadow. Until one day, Aegon gave up trying to find a way out and sank into a deep sleep on the Valyrian steel chair. Aegon, can you hear me? In his sleep, a familiar voice suddenly rang out in his mind. He instantly recognized it as Dany's calling to him. But she didn't pull his soul into the Emerald Dream. After all, she wasn't its master. And now, nourished by the immortal matter of the outer gods, Aegon's soul had become unimaginably powerful, many times stronger than Dany's. Even with her dream abilities, she was powerless to control it. Dany's, can you bring my soul back to the Emerald Dream? Aegon shouted into the unknown space of his dream. I can try. Don't resist, came Dany's echoing voice from the void. All right, Aegon replied. Silver dream energy slowly began to form in the void. But Aegon frowned as he looked at it, there was far too little. Without something to compare it to, he hadn't realized just how immensely powerful his soul had become. The silver energy Dany's sent could barely wrap around a single fingertip. Aegon extended his little finger into the silver energy and called out into the void, I'm ready. The silver dream energy flared brightly, but Aegon's little finger didn't budge. Left with no other choice, he severed the connection between his finger and the rest of his soul. The dream energy surged again and finally succeeded in pulling that small fragment of his soul back to the Emerald Dream. In an instant, Aegon possessed two perspectives, one from his physical body seated on the Valyrian steel chair, and the other from his fragmented soul now within the Emerald Dream. In the Emerald Dream, the small piece of Aegon's soul had taken human form and now stood face to face with Dany's. Her soul looked withered, nearly transparent, as if it could fade away at any moment. Your soul is too strong. Even using the power of dream reality, I could only bring back this much of you, Dany said with a weary smile. Aegon knew that altering reality with dream reality consumed one's essence and lifespan. He quickly stepped forward to support her and spoke gently, "I won't let you die." Daenerys smiled and shook her head. Aegon held her tenderly in his arms, then paused in thought before saying, "Can you try forcing your soul into reality, into my body, for example? My physical form is constantly being infused with the immortal substance of the outer gods. That substance could restore your life." Daenerys thought for a moment, then nodded. "I'll try." In Aegon's embrace, Daenerys began to emit a silver, mist-like dream glow once more. Gradually, her soul in the emerald dream transformed into tiny silver stars and slowly faded away. In the real world, atop the 14 flames, Aegon sat asleep in the metal chair, his eyes closed. Suddenly, a faint sting pricked between his brows, causing him to frown slightly. A silver, dragon-shaped mark slowly emerged on his forehead. He opened his eyes and gently brushed his fingers across the dragon mark, murmuring, "Daenerys, rest well." On the surface of the summer sea, a three-masted sailing ship, over 20 meters long, struggled forward through the storm. Ever since the chain reaction from the doom of Valyria, natural disasters and tempests had become frequent across the summer sea. Aedes Valentine stood tall at the bow, one hand tightly gripping a rope, the other raised high, holding the Valyrian steel family sword of House Valentine, Silver Flame. He had thick silver hair, a bold black beard, and an eye patch covering his left eye. Ahead of him, waves surged and crashed with overwhelming force. He suddenly turned toward his crew and bellowed over the storm. "Port sails, turn 1/3. Maintain balance at all costs." His voice remained clear even amidst the roaring winds. Whoosh, the wind howled sharply as torrential rain poured down. The ship was tossed violently among waves as tall as hills, like a fragile toy flung into the air by a giant, caught, then thrown again. Aedes returned to the cabin and opened an oak chest, carefully inspecting its contents. Only after confirming that the silver-scaled dragon egg inside was unharmed did he allow himself to ease up slightly. "May the heavens watch over House Valentine. We survived the doom of Valyria, surely we won't perish in a storm like this," Aedes thought to himself. After triple-checking that the dragon egg was secure, he returned to the deck to continue directing the crew. Originally, House Valentine had fallen into decline after two of their dragons were hunted down in Oros by Aegon and House Valerys working together. They also lost a fleet loaded with cargo, and from then on, their struggle against their political rivals, House Valerys, tilted downhill. Later, after Aegon and Tiamat won the champion dragon battle, two of House Valerys' legitimate sons recognized the head of House Targaryen as their godfather. With that early investment, House Valerys successfully secured a powerful backer. Leaning on Aegon's influence and his sway in the Dragonlord Council, House Valerys went on to eliminate the remaining dragons of House Valentine. Aedes discovered that House Valerys had dared to hunt dragons only because Aegon, the champion Dragonlord of House Targaryen, stood behind them. He knew he was no match for them. With their dragons wiped out, House Valentine had no choice but to flee the siege of their mortal enemies, House Valerys. As head of the house, Aedes fled the Valyrian Peninsula with the family's last remaining dragon egg, beginning a desperate escape. By sheer luck, that escape allowed them to narrowly avoid the doom that befell the Valyrian Peninsula. In truth, Aedes had been incredibly fortunate. When the Valentine ship broke through a curtain-like wall of waves, they finally left the storm behind. The sea gradually calmed, and the sun peeked through the clouds, casting light over the ship. The crew erupted in cheers, celebrating their survival. Even more to their surprise, the silhouette of land appeared ahead. Volantis, the free city that had become House Valentine's chosen refuge, was now in sight. Overcome with excitement, Aedes raised the family sword high and shouted toward the heavens. "Valerys, Targaryen, my house will see yours destroyed. Blood will pay for blood. We will not rest until your lines are wiped from this world." Valyria Peninsula, within the 14 flames. Over the past month, Aegon had witnessed several waves of explorers trying to enter Valyria from the outside. Some were likely searching for loved ones, while others coveted Valyria's legacy. Without exception, all of them were brutally slain by the grotesque, dragon corpse abominations wandering the peninsula. Months later, the volcanic ash that had hung over Valyria began to disperse under the washing rain. Then, a system notification rang out in Aegon's mind. "Ding! Congratulations! You have deeply participated in and successfully survived the mythical event, the Doom of Valyria. You have slightly altered the course of a myth-level destiny. Achievement rating, heroic. Reward, 1 hero level draw, guaranteed to yield a hero tier item. Epic, legendary, heroic. That's 2 tiers above epic, completely unprecedented. I wonder what rare item I'll draw this time, Aegon thought, then opened the draw panel. You have 1 hero draw opportunity. A hero tier item is guaranteed. Proceed with the draw. Yes, Aegon confirmed without hesitation. The system responded, congratulations. You have obtained a hero tier item, Living Saint. Item, Living Saint. Type, Authority. Quality, Hero. Rating, 691. Effect, you may reincarnate through your bloodline. Memories carried over into your next life will depend on the amount of destiny you invest. Usable only by guardian spirits. Note, as the years pass, your brilliance shall endure through time. Authority type items can be used repeatedly. In the divine hierarchy, fully understanding and mastering an authority is the first step toward godhood. If I can slowly digest this item over multiple reincarnations, I'll have a foundation for becoming a god. Heroquality items border on the mythic, far more powerful than I imagined. The soul split in the Emerald Dream should count as a guardian spirit and thus be able to use this item. Since Daenerys, now a dream imprint, sleeps on the forehead of my divine body, it's better to use this now than continue wasting time alone, Aegon thought after a long moment of reflection. He let his consciousness drift back into the Emerald Dream and opened his item inventory. Hero tier, Living Saint. Gold tier, 100 Years of Family. Dark purple, Emerald Dream. After a brief pause, Aegon decided to activate 100 Years of Family first. Instantly, his perspective shifted sharply, and he found himself high above Dragonstone. The world now looked like an incredibly realistic simulation, a vast sandbox. 2 points of light pulsed on the world map, one above Dragonstone, the other over the flesh pillar within the 14 flames. Time accelerated rapidly, everything evolving at high speed, though Aegon could do nothing but watch. The 100 Years of Family item ensured the survival and stability of his house for a full century. As the scenes flashed by like a slideshow, it became clear that House Targaryen had indeed avoided any major catastrophes. Aenar, known to the world as the Exile, had spent over a decade constructing the stronghold of Dragonstone and the mountain lair for dragons, Dragonmont. He then began amassing troops and commissioning maesters to map out Westeros in preparation for a future conquest. It wasn't that Aenar lacked the will to conquer Westeros, his house was simply too weak. They had only 3 dragons. Of those, only Valyrian had a bonded rider. Dreamshade and a brown adult dragon had both lost theirs. Aenar's uncle, once the tamer of the brown dragon, had died of illness shortly after arriving on Dragonstone. Now, after more than 10 years of construction, Aenar had grown old and no longer had the strength to lead a conquest. During this time, Aegon's eldest son Rhaegar married both of his sisters, Elaena and Elenay. Together, the 3 produced 3 children, Megan, Aerys, and Elenay. Thanks to the dragonkeepers brought from Valyria, the Targaryens had begun to attract wild dragons using bait. Combined with external purchases and eggs laid by Dreamshade, the population of dragons on Dragonmont steadily grew, though most were still younglings. From time to time, Aegon switched his viewpoint between Valyria and the sandbox. His consciousness remained anchored to the sandbox world, while his body within the 14 flames continued syncing memories, mostly of sleep and vivid dreams with Daenerys. There was, after all, little else to do atop the lonely metal platform. After her life was restored through the immortal substance, Daenerys did not return to the Emerald Dream. Fearing she might not find her way back to the physical world, she left a spiritual imprint on Aegon's forehead so she could stay with him while he slept in his demigod body. Beyond the 2 perspectives Aegon had witnessed, many major events unfolded across the world following the destruction of the Valyrian Peninsula. The fall of the Valyrian Freehold, the dominant power of the known world, created a vast power vacuum. First to act were the former colonies of the Freehold, Slavers Bay, the Free Cities, the Rhoyne River Basin, and Andalos. All declared independence. Among the 9 free cities, conflict quickly erupted. With their former masters gone and none willing to submit to the others, they descended into brutal infighting. Of them, Volantis was the strongest. It had been the very first colony founded by the Valyrian Freehold and was known as the eldest daughter of Valyria. Volantis was now ruled by 3 major political factions, the Dragon Party, the Tiger Party, and the Elephant Party. The Dragon Party was founded by the Dragonlord family of House Valentine, long-standing rivals of House Targaryen. But at present, House Valentine's dragons were still too young, and the dragon party itself had only recently formed, making it the weakest of the three. Nonetheless, the people of Volantis proclaimed themselves the rightful heirs of the Freehold and the world's legitimate rulers. They continued to argue among themselves about how to achieve world domination, but with the dragons of House Valentine gradually maturing, it was only a matter of time before this powerful city-state would stir up a bloodbath among the free cities. Lee, another of the 9 free cities, lay to the west of Volantis. After the doom, several of Lee's dragonlords survived. But the locals turned on them, killing both dragons and their riders. According to intelligence gathered by House Targaryen, the Faceless Men seemed to have played a significant role in these events. Qohor, an inland free city, also bore witness to its own turmoil. There, one dragonlord, delayed on a long mission, had failed to receive the recall order from the Dragonlord Council. His name was Orion, one of the few dragonlords to survive the doom. Rallying soldiers from among the Qohori colonists, Orion declared himself the first emperor of Valyria. He mounted his dragon, led an army of 30,000 infantry toward the ruins of Valyria, and announced his intent to rebuild the Freehold. But no one ever saw Emperor Orion or his army again. From Aegon's vantage point within the 14 Flames, it was clear what had happened. Qohor, along with its dragons and troops, had all perished, consumed by the plague-aridden lands of Valyria and the tidal swarms of flesh-eating insects. After years of breeding and mutation, the insects had evolved into increasingly powerful and grotesque creatures, most carrying lethal venom or raging disease. Far to the east on the continent of Essos, a bloodthirsty nomadic people, the Dothraki, were rising. Led by a powerful Khal who had united several Horselords, they swept westward, destroying countless ancient kingdoms and civilizations in their path. After seizing vast territories in the heart of Essos, they named the land the Dothraki Sea, which became the great pastureland of the Horselords. Following the collapse of the Valyrian Freehold Empire in the Doom, the world was plunged into a century of unrelenting turmoil, a period remembered as the Century of Blood. During this time, the 10th free city, Gogossos, was destroyed. Other Valyria-related events from this chaotic era are omitted here due to length. The perspective shifted once more, back to Dragonstone. A full century had passed. House Targaryen had taken firm root on Dragonstone, having now produced 5 generations. Though they brought some of their legacy with them when they fled Valyria, a new threat had risen across the narrow sea, the Dragon Party of Volantis. In this era, only 2 Dragonlord houses remained in the world, House Targaryen and House Valentine. The two had clashed many times, trading victories and defeats, each suffering losses. Then one day, Aegon withdrew from the observing vantage of the Sandtable world, and his soul fragment returned to the Emerald Dream. Snapping back to awareness, it felt to him like he had just watched a century-long film. Without hesitation, Aegon poured all of his destiny points into preserving as many memories as possible and activated the Herotier item, Living Saint. His soul fragment was engulfed in a flash of white light and vanished from the Emerald Dream. Dragonstone, situated on the narrow sea near the continent of Westeros. Autumn storms were frequent in this region, growing even fiercer in winter. Today, an autumn storm was already bearing down. The stone drum tower served as Dragonstone's military council chamber. When storms struck, the ancient walls echoed with deep rumbling, hence the tower's name. Inside the map room of the stone drum tower, a silver-haired boy lay fast asleep atop a massive wooden table. Suddenly, a clap of thunder roared overhead, jolting him from his dreams. The boy slowly opened his eyes and raised his head. He had pale violet eyes, and though a few loose bangs hung over his forehead, a fine silver dragon mark was clearly visible at the center. It added a distinctive charm to his sharp-featured face, strong jaw, defined contours, and skin white as snow. Aegon slowly stood up, still dizzy from the effects of reincarnation. Once the fog in his head began to clear, he glanced around the room and quickly realized he was now inside the stone drum tower on Dragonstone. Lowering his head slightly, his gaze fell on the oak table in front of him, engraved with a detailed map of Westeros. He extended his left hand and placed it gently over the Stormlands. Then slowly, he turned his head, following his right hand as he moved it over the veil. Aegon raised his head. Lightning flashed, illuminating his amethyst-like eyes, which now gleamed with fierce ambition. Suddenly, he struck the map table twice with the knuckles of his right hand. Bang! Bang! If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. P. Atrian Comp. BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 12 comments 0 vote. Chapter 52. Family. There was a faint sound outside the map room door, followed by an old yet gentle voice asking softly, Aegon, what's going on? Fragments of memory flashed through Aegon's mind. He recalled that the voice belonged to a very old nurse from the Targaryen family. For as long as he could remember, she had been the one looking after the children on Dragonstone. Strangely, everyone simply called her, Old Nan. Aegon couldn't remember her actual name. He called out toward the door, it's nothing. Don't worry. That aged voice replied again, this time with a touch of reminder, Aegon, it's almost time for the banquet. Go on to the dining hall. Aegon responded casually, got it. At the moment, Aegon's body was just 10 years old. It was the reincarnated vessel of a living saint, created with the help of a special item. This body was his own, but the consciousness from his past life had only just awakened. Aegon closed his eyes slightly, murmured silently to himself, and a translucent screen appeared before his eyes as his attribute panel opened. Aegon Targaryen. Basic attributes growing, politics, 83, strategy, 91, military strategy, 95, mental strength, 79, vitality, 67 93rds. Talents, S-Class Alien Chip True Dragonblood Dragonlord, C-Class Outer Tyrant, Inner King, C-Class Apocalypse Dreamtrace. Skills. Destiny points. 0. Items. Aegon's eyes slowly swept over his stats, silently assessing them. These attributes are downright magnificent. Martial prowess at 93, astonishing. Even in this 10-year-old body, my vitality's already at 67, far beyond an average adult. Mental strength at 79 isn't the highest, but still impressive. The rest of the stats are equally outstanding. Aegon focused and mentally opened the details of his talents. S-Class Alien Chip, its power was self-evident, remarkable analytical and deductive abilities, and the capacity to probe all things. True Dragonblood Dragonlord allows Aegon to tame multiple dragons. Currently, one taming slot is taken by Tiamat. With his current mental strength, he likely has room for only one more. C-Class Apocalypse Dreamtrace, the dream scar on your forehead allows you to receive random visions of the future through apocalypse. The likelihood of these visions is influenced by your mental state. C-Class Outer Tyrant, Inner King, you can freely switch between the tyrannical and royal states. Tyrannical state. Vitality instantly increases by 25%, and you gain the secondary talent Tyrant's Body. Royal state. Mental strength increases by 25%, and you gain the secondary talent Royal Might. Tyrant's Body greatly enhances physical resilience by 200%. Resilience reduces the effects of negative status effects such as slowness, knockback, and stun. Royal Might, a unique biological magnetic field forms around you, subtly improving the friendliness of nearby creatures toward you. The field's range and influence depend on both parties' mental strength. The effects of Outer Tyrant, Inner King were undeniably powerful and dazzling, like a talent tailor-made for a natural-born faction leader. With a soft click, the door creaked open. Old Nan stood with her hands on her hips and her cheeks puffed out, shaking her head gently at Aegon with a trace of playful reproach in her eyes. Seeing this, Aegon gave a helpless shrug and smiled in a placating way. All right, I just dozed off a little. Let's head to the hall together. Old Nan seemed to think he was moving too slowly. She strode over in a flash, and with one arm behind his back and the other under his knees, she easily lifted Aegon off the ground. No. Old Nan, I'm already 10, I can walk on my own, huh? Just as Aegon began to struggle, his body suddenly froze. His eyes widened as he stared intently at Old Nan's deeply wrinkled face. The moment she touched him, Aegon had instinctively used the chip to scan her physical data. What he found stunned him. Ilya Targaryen. Basic attributes. Politics, 36, strategy, 57, military strategy, 27, mental strength, 112, vitality, 45. Talents. C-Class Greenhand Bloodline Elder, plus 150% natural affinity, lifespan extended by 50 years, and plus 1 base mental strength per year of age. C-Class Skin Changer Sea Dragon, you can enter the consciousness of animals or others and control their behavior. You can form contracts with animal partners of compatible mental affinity. The number of partners depends on mental strength and compatibility. Current contracted animal partner, 1. D-Class Chaste, plus 5 mental strength for remaining pure before marriage, +10 mental strength for loyalty to a spouse after marriage. True Dragonblood Dragonseed. Skills. Aegon had never expected that the unremarkable old nurse from Dragonstone was actually his wife from his previous life. He quietly reflected, C-class Greenhand bloodline elder did indeed extend one's lifespan, no wonder she had survived the bloody age. He remembered clearly that Ilya's talent had once been D-class Greenhand bloodline maiden. Could it be that her base mental strength exceeded 100, which triggered an upgrade in the bloodline? Aegon wasn't sure. Ilya had been very young when she left the Valyrian Peninsula. At the time, Aegon had refrained from letting her conceive to safeguard her health. But who would have thought that, a century later, they'd meet again like this? Time passed in the blink of an eye. The world had changed, and Ilya had gone from a charming young girl to this wrinkled old nurse. Cradling Aegon, Ilya walked briskly, light on her feet. It was obvious, even at such an age, her body remained strong. She could still carry a growing boy and move like the wind. Just like that, the two of them made their way straight to the dining hall. In the elegantly furnished dining hall, the members of House Targaryen were already seated in order of seniority. Aegon strolled in, his gaze slowly sweeping over those at the table. The first faces he saw were his kind, gentle parents. At the head of the table sat his grandfather, Demian. Looking further down the table, his eyes fell on two striking young women, the family's radiant jewels, Visenya and Rhaenys. Both sisters had inherited the hallmark silver-gold hair of Valyrian lineage, shimmering brilliantly under the soft light of the dining room. Rhaenys' silky silver hair hung loosely behind her. The moment she spotted Aegon entering, a mischievous gleam flickered in her eyes as she playfully winked her left eye at him. Aegon raised his left eyebrow in response. In his memories, Rhaenys had always been this lively and playful. It was one of the reasons the two siblings had always gotten along so well. Beside her sat Visenya, who had styled her long golden hair into two neat braids that rested gently over her chest. Her fuller curves gave her a more mature and alluring presence compared to her younger sister. She wore a fitted outfit embroidered with dragons and flames, the tailored design perfectly accentuating her graceful figure. When Visenya glanced up and saw Aegon, she subtly straightened her posture, then seemingly without intention, arched her proud chest forward. From the corner of her eye, she stole a quiet glance at him. Noticing Aegon's gaze lingering on her chest, the corners of her delicate lips curled into a faint, triumphant smile. At that moment, Grandfather Demian raised his hand slightly, gesturing for Aegon to come sit beside him. Now in his 70s, Demian's hair had turned gray at the temples, but he still sat tall and proud. The weight of years had only deepened his commanding presence. He was the current dragon tamer of Balerion and the only remaining magical dragon knight of the family. The meal began. In keeping with Targaryen custom, they ate in relative silence, without much conversation. Yet Aegon keenly noticed the distant look in his father Aerion's eyes, a shadow of worry that seemed hard to dispel. After the meal, Demian gracefully picked up a handkerchief and gently wiped his hands. Aegon, Visenya, Rhaenys, you three are grown now. It's time to begin contributing to the house and taking on responsibility. Come with me to the study. Demian's voice was serious. As he finished speaking, he turned and walked away. The rest of the family said nothing, quietly following him into the nearby study. The room carried a faint scent of whale oil and ink. Sunlight streamed in through the windows, casting patches of light and shadow across the floor. Demian leaned close to old Nan and spoke a few soft words. She gave a slight bow, then turned to a bookshelf in the corner. After searching for a moment, she returned slowly with a scroll cradled in both hands. Demian took it and laid it gently on the table, then slowly unrolled it. A finely detailed map of the continent of Essos spread out before them. The lines were clear and precise, the markings vivid with color, and the layout of various forces meticulously illustrated. Look here, Demian said, pointing to a section of the map. His voice was calm and low. This is the city-state of Volantis. It has grown rapidly in recent years, and its power is surging. Most notably, the dragon party that dominates the city-state is led by the Valentine family, who hold a deep grudge against our house. Their ancestors clashed with ours long ago. To this day, they still uphold the ancestral oath. They will not rest until House Targaryen is destroyed. Back then, with the vast legacy we brought from Valyria, we had the strength to begin the conquest of Westeros in my generation. But the Valentine family repeatedly attacked Dragonstone, costing us countless troops and draining the wealth and foundation of our house. Aegon's father, Aerion, added, Volantis now claims to be the true heir of the Freehold Empire. The Dragon Party's government is bent on world conquest and rebuilding the Freehold Empire. Their army has taken Myr and expanded east of the Rhoyne River, reaching its upper basin. Their navy has seized Lee and recently blockaded the Narrow Sea. Our vassals, House Velaryon, have been forced to retreat to Blackwater Bay. The situation has become extremely dangerous for us. Grandfather, if the Black Dread is the strongest and largest dragon, why don't we just go wipe them out? Rhaenys asked, eyes wide with confusion. War isn't as simple as you think, Demian replied with a slow shake of his head. His brow furrowed slightly, and a trace of helplessness appeared in his eyes. The Narrow Sea is already under blockade by Volantis. If we rush to confront the Dragon Party, Dragonstone would be left unguarded, and without dragon defense, the Volantin navy would seize the opportunity to strike. The hard truth is, our house currently has only one dragon knight. But there is hope. You three, this generation of siblings, performed exceptionally well during Valyrian's bloodline test. Before long, I'll arrange for you to begin dragon training. Hearing this, Aegon was quietly stunned. He hadn't realized House Targaryen's situation had become so dire. In that case, our primary enemy is Volantis. Once we've dealt with them, we'll move on to conquer Westeros. Visenya looked her grandfather straight in the eye, her gaze resolute. Demian gave a slight nod. I've already arranged an alliance with Argilac Durrandon, king of the Stormlands. In 2 months, we'll launch a joint assault on the Volantin navy and break through their blockade. So, you must be ready to tame dragons at any time during those 2 months. Aegon exchanged glances with his sisters, then all three responded in unison, understood. Demian reached out and gently stroked Aegon's cheek, his eyes full of affection. Good boy, cough cough cough. Before he could finish, a harsh coughing fit suddenly overtook him. Demian quickly covered his mouth with his hand, his body trembling slightly. Aegon hurried forward and steadied the old man by the waist, his eyes filled with concern. Demian waved a hand, gasping for breath as he tried to regain control. Then, with a forced lightness, he said to the 3 siblings, it's nothing. There's been heavy rain lately, I just caught a bit of a cold, nothing serious. Aegon, Visenya, and Rhaenys exchanged another glance. At Ilya's gentle prompting, they slowly stepped out of the study. Aegon couldn't help but glance back. Through the window, he saw his grandfather's silhouette racked by another fit of coughing. The sound struck his heart like a blow, and his brow involuntarily furrowed. The 3 siblings returned to their room under Ilya's guidance. Lying on his bed, Aegon began to carefully sift through the memories of his past life. Most of his previous life's memories had already awakened, and he felt a quiet relief. Those hundreds of destiny points hadn't been spent in vain. However, the apocalypse dream trace left by Daenerys seemed to have had little effect. Aegon continued to reflect on the current situation. He knew full well how limited his strength was right now. Only after taming a dragon could he truly begin to change things. After all, he was still just a boy, unable to influence the larger picture in any meaningful way. He slowly closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. There was no familiar pulling sensation, no entrance into Daenerys' dream to enjoy joy or recover stamina. He silently regretted it in his heart. The next morning, sunlight filtered gently through the cracks in the window and warmed Aegon's face. He slowly opened his eyes and woke from his slumber. With Ilya's attentive help, Aegon dressed and made his way to the dining hall, where he ate his breakfast quietly. Afterward, Aegon and his whipping boy headed toward the training yard to practice martial skills. On the continent of Westeros, whipping boys were part of a unique system. Because noble children held privileged status, they couldn't be subjected to corporal punishment during education and training. Thus, whipping boys were created to receive punishments on their behalf when they made mistakes. Over time, this practice became a widely accepted tradition. Dragonstone, home of House Targaryen and located near the mainland, had adopted certain local customs, including this one. Aegon's whipping boy was a stocky teen with a solid frame. His muscles showed faintly beneath his simple clothes, but he was quiet by nature, not one for conversation, and always followed silently behind Aegon. Just as Aegon was about to pick up his practice sword and spar with his swordsmanship instructor. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of Ilya running toward him in a panic. Her brow was furrowed, eyes full of urgency, and her quick footsteps stirred a faint breeze. Seeing this, Aegon was immediately filled with confusion. He quickly set down his sword and looked at her with puzzlement, thinking to himself, what could have made her this flustered? Did the dragon party from Volantis attack? Aegon, come with me. Ilya ran up to him, barely able to catch her breath, and spoke urgently while reaching for his hand, pulling him toward the main keep. Dragged along, Aegon couldn't help but run with her, asking as they went, what happened? Your grandfather, he's dying. Her voice trembled as she spoke. The words hit Aegon like a blow. His heart clenched as if seized by an invisible hand. His grandfather Demian was the only dragon knight of House Targaryen, the house's pillar of Valyrian steel. If he truly was on the verge of death, it would be a devastating loss for the family. Aegon and Ilya raced through the corridors. When they arrived at the door to Demian's bedchamber, they found a crowd had already gathered outside. Faces were grave, and hushed whispers passed between the onlookers. From inside came the wails of Aegon's mother, Valyna. Her anguished cries further eroded what little hope he had left. Taking a deep breath, Aegon stepped into the room. A heavy sorrow hung in the air. His mother, Valyna, sat by the bed, clutching Demian's hand as she wept uncontrollably. Her shoulders shook with every sob, and her tears poured down like floodwaters, soaking the sleeves of Demian's robe. Grandfather Demian lay quietly on the bed, his face pale as paper, eyes closed, chest unmoving. He was gone. Aegon stared at his grandfather's body, frozen in place. He had failed to see him one last time. He had always held a decent impression of Demian, a kind elder whose patient teachings from just last night still echoed in his ears. Slowly, he walked to his mother's side and gently placed a hand on her back in silent comfort. Valyna immediately pulled him into a tight embrace. Not long after, Visenya and Rhaenys arrived in a rush. Their eyes were red-rimmed, and their steps uneven, they had clearly run all the way. Reaching the bedside, the sisters looked at their grandfather's body and couldn't hold back their tears. The family gathered there, overwhelmed by grief. Night descended over Dragonstone like a vast curtain of black silk. In front of the dragon pit, Aerion directed the servants as they worked busily to construct a funeral pyre. They had carefully built the platform right before Balerian's lair. At this moment, with no dragons currently under their control, the members of House Targaryen waited in solemn anticipation, hoping Balerion would appear of his own accord to ignite his former master's body and fulfill the ancient and sacred funeral rites of the dragonlords of Old Valyria. Roar! A mournful dragon cry echoed through the night. A colossal dragon, as massive as a mountain, rose from Dragonmont. Like a moving hill, it crawled toward the pyre, its every movement causing the ground to tremble. For the first time in a century, Aegon laid eyes on Balerion once more. Its enormous body was even larger than he remembered, nearly matching the standard size of a dragonlord's steed, about 150 meters long. Its body was covered in dark, iron-like scales etched with mysterious markings, glinting faintly with a cold, eerie sheen in the dim light. Its enormous wings were folded at its sides, like two great black sails. Its head resembled a hill, with thick, curved horns like twin blades, emanating a fearsome aura. Balerion's dark crimson eyes burned like twin flames, deep and enigmatic. Even a single glance from the beast was enough to inspire awe and fear. Balerion slowly lowered his massive head. His huge nostrils flared as he gently sniffed at Demian's remains. Then, lifting his head toward the sky, he let out a sorrowful roar, a sound like a tsunami crashing into the heavens, like thunder rumbling through the mountains. All of Dragonstone seemed to shake with the sound. At once, black flame began to gather in Balerion's throat. The dark fire flowed out like living tongues, softly licking at Demian's body before suddenly igniting into a roaring blaze. The black flames danced in the night wind, illuminating the grief-stricken faces of the Targaryens gathered around. Visenya bit her lip, struggling to keep from sobbing, but her tears fell like broken pearls, soaking the front of her dress. Rhaenys collapsed into Aegon's arms, wailing uncontrollably. Aegon stood frozen, watching as Demian's body was gradually consumed by the fire, reduced to ash. A complex tide of emotion surged in his chest. Am I some kind of harbinger of death? I've barely arrived, and already I've lost someone so important. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon comp BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 10 comments 0 vote. Chapter 53. Visenya. After grandfather Demian's passing, House Targaryen, following a period of deep mourning, was forced to confront a harsh reality: the family was in urgent need of a dragon rider. As a result, Aegon and his sisters had their dragon training schedule pushed forward. Once again, the Targaryens gathered in the study of the Dragonstone Tower to discuss the matter. I think I can give it another try. I've never approached Balerion before, maybe he'll take a liking to a true dragon like me, said Aerion, Aegon's father, breaking the silence. Aerion had never managed to tame a dragon, something that had always weighed heavily on his heart. As the Lord of Dragonstone, he had seen most of the dragons on Dragonmont either tamed or tried by others. Balerion, who had always had a rider, was one of the few untouched, until now. Hearing this, Aegon sighed inwardly. He had long since examined Aerion's attributes. Though he had dragon blood, it was diluted. There was no chance he could tame a dragon. Perhaps it was fate. In the 2 generations before Aegon, House Targaryen had flourished with many members. But after the war with the Kingdom of Volantis, their numbers had steadily dwindled. Then, something unexpected happened. Visenya stepped confidently into the center of the study, her posture proud and expression sharp with resolve. Father, I believe I'm the one best suited to ride him, she declared loudly. She glanced around the room, and finally her eyes settled on Aegon. Looks like the allure of being the strongest, and the last, Dragonlord of this age is hard to resist, Aegon thought. He smiled faintly. There was no way he was going to let this spiral out of control. Without hesitation, he walked straight to the wall, grabbed the nearly 10-pound Valyrian steel family sword, Blackfire, and with a heavy thud, planted it firmly on the floor. Father, sister, if you want to tame Balerion, you'll need to get through me first, Aegon said boldly, his gaze sharp with confidence. When it's time to fight, you fight. Playing nice never wins you anything. Rhaenys ran up to him, linked her arm through his and pressed it to her chest. Lifting her chin toward Visenya, she declared, that's right. Brother's the one with the best chance of taming Balerion. I'm backing him. Seeing Aegon's determination, Aerion chuckled and shook his head. All right, I was just joking. I'll step aside. And Visenya, stop messing around, let your brother handle it. But Visenya wasn't ready to back down so easily. She turned to her sister with a defiant look and said stubbornly, I'm the eldest. It's only right that I go first. Besides, Aegon's never beaten me, not once. I'm the strongest Targaryen. Aegon looked at her proud, headstrong expression and couldn't help but laugh. In that case, let's have a match. If I lose, you go first. Sound fair? Don't be ridiculous, Visenya, Aerion tried to interject, not wanting this to cause tension between his children. But Visenya ignored him and answered crisply, deal. That's more like my good little brother. Aegon glanced at his father and shook his head slightly, signaling him not to interfere. Fine, Aerion said with a resigned sigh. If you're set on competing, so be it, but training swords only. No real blades. The family left the study and made their way to the training ground beneath the Dragonwing Tower. Aegon and Visenya stepped into the arena and each picked a training sword that suited their style. These were unsharpened, designed to be safe for sparring. Go, brother. Rhaenys cheered, waving her tiny fists and bouncing excitedly in place. Aerion brought Rhaenys, his wife, and the rest of the family up to the second-floor corridor of the Dragonwing Tower. The vantage point offered a full view of the training ground, perfect for spectating. Aegon gripped a 1.4-meter greatsword, his usual broadsword of choice. Thanks to his mastery of Valyrian military swordsmanship, he had developed a complete combat style tailored to his strengths. Visenya chose a hand-and-a-half sword, shorter and lighter than Aegon's, the kind of longsword often favored by women. Aegon planted both hands on his blade, held it upright before him, bent his knees into a slight crouch, and assumed a textbook Valyrian military stance, balanced, ready for attack or defense. Visenya frowned slightly, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She looked at him curiously, wondering why he wasn't using the Dragonthorn sword technique that instructor Saren had always taught him. Still, she didn't dwell on it. She raised her slender blade level with her chest and readied herself. Quick sword. Aegon raised an eyebrow, then pushed off the ground without hesitation, launching a rising thrust, the top strike move from Valyrian military swordsmanship, as he took the initiative to attack Visenya. Although Visenya was caught off guard by Aegon's sudden advance, she didn't panic. She extended her arm and aimed the tip of her sword at Aegon's shoulder, forcing him into a choice. If he kept charging, he'd be the one getting hurt. Aegon gripped his greatsword with both hands and swung it with explosive force, cleaving toward the direction of Visenya's thrust. This was one of the 12 major variations of Valyrian military swordsmanship, cross-strike. A sharp clang rang out as metal scraped against metal. Visenya's hand-and-a-half sword was knocked clean out of her grasp. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She couldn't fathom how Aegon had managed such a fierce counter. But she didn't back down. Raising her leg high, she launched a kick at Aegon. Aegon instantly switched techniques, rotating his waist and bringing his greatsword around in a sweeping crescent slash. The weapon howled through the air with tremendous force. If that blow had landed, even with a blunt training sword, Visenya would have suffered serious internal damage. Thankfully, just as the blade was about to strike her leather armor, Aegon turned the slash into a blunt sweep, knocking Visenya off her feet and sending her tumbling to the ground. Standing over her, Aegon looked down with calm certainty. His voice was steady but left no room for doubt. Give it up. You can't beat me. The gap between our swordsmanship is far beyond what you imagine. Impossible. You've never beaten me in swordsmanship, not once since we were children. There's no way this is real. Visenya's voice trembled, her chest rising and falling rapidly, clearly struggling to accept the outcome. Aegon simply shook his head, his tone composed. To help you give up completely, and out of respect for you as a warrior, I'll go all out. Come, Visenya. I'll make sure you accept it. With that, Aegon re-entered his stance, planting his greatsword vertically before him, gripping it tightly. At the same time, he activated his outer tyrant, inner king state and switched it to tyrant's body mode. His vitality surged by 25% in an instant. A jolt, like a current of electricity, surged through his body, and a terrifying, overwhelming presence radiated from him. Visenya pushed herself up with her sword, her expression now deadly serious. She took several deep breaths before letting out a sharp cry and charging forward with full force. Her iron sword raised high overhead, she brought it down with all the power she could muster. A loud crash echoed across the field as sparks burst from the clash. Aegon caught the strike cleanly, unmoved, standing like a stone pillar. Visenya's sword skidded off his with a screech, guided aside by the control of Aegon's blade. Aegon stepped forward into a wide lunge. With the momentum of the clash, Visenya stumbled forward and fell right into Aegon's chest. He dropped his sword and caught her at the waist, pulling her into a tight embrace. Her soft chest pressed flush against his, forming two enticing curves between them. Their eyes met. Aegon's gaze was calm and steady. He spoke softly, "Surrender to me, sister." Visenya's eyes went wide as she stared at him, stunned. She was still just a 12-year-old medieval girl. How could she withstand Aegon's sudden, domineering advance? Her body went limp, her limbs lost their strength, and her mind went blank like a frozen moment in time. Around them, the Targaryens burst into laughter at Aegon's unexpected move. Aerion looked on with a pleased smile, clearly proud. Only Rhaenys, standing off to the side, stomped her foot with a pout, glaring at the two show-offs at the center of the field, her face full of jealousy. Her eyes reddened, and she turned away with a sharp huff before storming off. Visenya buried her face in Aegon's chest. Though he couldn't see her expression, the flush reaching all the way to her neck and the trembling of her body told Aegon he might have taken the joke too far. He gently patted her back in an attempt to soothe her. Visenya covered her face with both hands, finally shedding her usual pride and revealing the side of her that was just a girl, just a little sister. Without looking back, she turned and hurried away amid the laughter of their gathered kin. Aegon turned his gaze toward Dragonmont and thought quietly, now that I've gotten my sister out of the way, no one can stand between us anymore. Valyrian, you and I, this is destiny. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon comp BlurryDream. Chapter 54, The Madness of Volantis. Aegon made his way alone up Dragonmont toward Valyrian's lair. He hadn't asked anyone to guide him, he'd been there once before, during his grandfather Demian's cremation, and still remembered the path. The mountain was composed mostly of black volcanic rock, its surface rough and hardened by heat and time. Here and there, carvings and sculptures of dragons were etched into the rock face, remnants of ancient Valyrian craftsmanship. Aegon turned his head to look out over the distant horizon. The vast waters of Blackwater Bay stretched before him, waves crashing against the reefs near Dragonstone, sending up great plumes of spray with a thunderous roar. The dragon tower on Dragonstone soared into the clouds. At its peak, the screaming hall overlooked everything below like a sovereign sentinel. From its balcony, the Targaryen family watched from afar, the breeze stirring their cloaks and robes as they observed Aegon's approach to the dragon's nest. A short while later, Aegon reached the edge of Valyrian's lair. The dragon's nest lay in a natural depression along the mountainside. Years of the great beast's movements had compacted the ground into a rock-hard basin. As Aegon stepped forward, he could feel how firm and solid the earth was beneath his feet. Dragonmont still preserved the Valyrian tradition of raising dragons through a semi-wild system, and the lair itself remained partially open to the elements. Aegon spotted the enormous black dragon still curled up inside the nest and felt a wave of relief. Had Balerion gone out hunting, he would have faced a long wait. Balerion noticed Aegon's presence but merely cast him a fleeting glance before turning away, uninterested. Perhaps the death of his former master had left him in a somber mood. Aegon approached cautiously but steadily, careful not to make any sudden moves that might startle the dragon. This was his second time attempting to tame a dragon. Although Balerion had a fierce reputation, he seemed far more composed than Tiamat, the infamous beast once called a devil. At least in Aegon's eyes, Balerion was still relatively mild-tempered. The distance between them steadily closed, 200 meters, 150. A sudden image from a century ago flashed through Aegon's mind, he and Aenar being tested for their bloodline. The memory stirred a faint melancholy. Perhaps it was the Dragonlord blood running through his veins, but this time Balerion didn't resist. Aegon approached without incident, the dragon remaining still in the nest, seemingly not even looking his way. He's ignoring me, Aegon thought, a bit embarrassed. Maybe after serving 2 previous masters, Balerion just doesn't care anymore. Without hesitation, Aegon grabbed the rope ladder attached to the dragon's flank and began to climb. Balerion's body towered nearly 20 meters high like a small mountain, but Aegon scaled it with ease and mounted the saddle. In that moment, his blood awakened. Aegon's spiritual field merged with Balerion's, and a bond beyond words was forged, one of dragon and rider. Balerion finally stirred. The great beast turned its massive head and let out a thunderous roar, acknowledging his new master. Balerion, fly, Aegon commanded in High Valyrian. Balerion rose from the nest, dragging his immense tail as he walked toward a cliff edge on Dragonmont. Dragonstone, ringed with steep cliffs, especially to the north, had long used these natural drop-offs to help dragons launch into flight. Dragonmont, built on the island's northern face, made such takeoffs easier. Balerion reached the cliff's edge. Aegon looked out over the deep waters of Blackwater Bay. With a single mighty leap, the dragon launched into the air, stone fragments flying in every direction. Its wings, spanning more than 100 meters, spread wide as it soared into the sky. After a brief descent, Balerion beat his wings with tremendous force and began to rise. From the balcony of the Dragon Tower, the Targaryens erupted into cheers at Aegon's successful taming of the dragon. Visenya pumped her fist in the air with joy and shouted Aegon's name. Her eyes were locked onto his figure atop Balerion, full of admiration and yearning. Her heart surged with passion. In that moment, she wished it were her on that dragon's back. Fiery and proud, Visenya loved fiercely and hated with equal intensity. Now that Aegon had shown his affection for her, she was fully committed to fighting her sister for him. Competitive by nature, Visenya had always dreamed of a powerful dragonlord as a husband, and Aegon, the strongest of them all, fit that dream perfectly. She had harbored feelings for Aegon since childhood. Now that he had defeated her in combat, those feelings only grew stronger. Rhaenys was also waving excitedly at Aegon, but as she caught sight of her sister's exuberant face, her mood soured. Her thoughts drifted back to the duel on the training field, and her small lips pouted again. She and Visenya had been opposites since they were young, constantly at odds, clashing over toys, treats, and attention, always ending in tears and tantrums. Rhaenys brooded with quiet frustration. Aegon's always liked me more, so why the sudden change? Her eyes drifted to her sister's chest, watching the way it bounced with every leap and cheer. She let out a silent sigh. In her heart, Rhaenys believed she was better than her sister in every way, personality, looks, brains, everything but her figure. She wasn't as full-bodied, and she couldn't beat Visenya in a fight. Could that really be why Aegon doesn't like me anymore? Their mother, Valyna, perceptive and sensitive, immediately noticed her younger daughter's mood. She gently pulled Rhaenys into her arms, offering a soft, comforting smile. Rhaenys flushed with embarrassment and buried her face in her mother's chest. High above, Aegon soared through the sky on Balerion's back. From the air, he could faintly make out the silhouette of Driftmark, domain of House Velaryon, vassals of House Targaryen. As it was his first flight on Balerion, Aegon didn't travel far. He simply circled Dragonstone once, allowing the people below to witness a dragon rider in flight, restoring morale among the Targaryens and the island folk in the wake of Demian's death. After returning to Dragonmont, Aegon ordered the dragonkeepers to give Balerion an extra meal. Then he returned to the Dragon Tower, reuniting with his family to celebrate the success of his bonding. Aerion, the head of House Targaryen, decided to host a grand feast in honor of his son's achievement. In the past, Daemon had grown too old and frail to ride Balerion into battle, which had left the Targaryens powerless to respond to the provocations of the dragon party from Volantis. But now, with Balerion once again under their command, the tides could turn. With just one decisive strike, the entire balance of power might shift in Targaryen favor. It was a moment worth celebrating, an opportunity to rally the morale of their bannermen and allies. The feast was scheduled for 5 days later. Invitations were sent not only to their old vassals, House Velaryon and House Celtigar, but also to 2 Westerosi houses with close ties to Dragonstone, House Bar Emmon of Sharp Point and House Massey of Stoneadens. Though technically sworn to Storm's End, these 2 houses had stronger ties with the Targaryens. Before the banquet, Aegon took his father's advice and toured their territories atop Balerion. The Targaryens' sphere of influence was still relatively small, so it didn't take long to complete the flight. His first stop was Driftmark. Aegon flew high over the island as the people of High Tide cheered at the sight of the great dragon. Lord Daemon Balerion, along with his wife and children, emerged from High Tide Castle and knelt on one knee as Balerion passed overhead, a show of loyalty and submission. Balerion had become the living symbol of House Targaryen's might. Daemon had already received a letter informing him that Aegon had inherited Balerion from Daemon and was planning to visit Dragonstone to offer his congratulations. Aegon didn't land on Driftmark. He simply had Balerion dip low in greeting before soaring off once more. Next, they flew toward Claw Isle. House Celtigar, like House Velaryon, had once fled the Valyrian Peninsula. But compared to Velaryon, they were far less influential. Most senior naval command positions within the Targaryen forces were held by members of House Velaryon, leaving Celtigar somewhat sidelined, their roles overlapping but far less prominent. After Balerion made a brief pass over Claw Isle, Aegon turned back toward Dragonstone. Several days later, the banquet was held as planned. In the Great Hall of the main keep, Aerion had Aegon seated beside him at the high table, an unmistakable sign of a shift in power within House Targaryen. Though Aerion had yet to formally step down as head of the house, Aegon was already issuing commands and taking on leadership responsibilities. The heads of the 2 major vassal houses approached with deep respect, bowing slightly before offering toasts to Aegon. He received them with a warm smile, sharing a few words of encouragement. Next came the lords of House Bar Emmon and House Massey. Because of their proximity to Dragonstone, these houses respected the overwhelming power of the dragons and had been drawn in by the wealth and influence of House Targaryen. Though they remained nominally loyal to Storm's End, in practice, they now served Dragonstone. Their leaders likewise congratulated Aegon with deference, and he responded to each with composed grace. House Massey, whose seat was at Massey's Hook, held particular strategic value as a bulwark against House Valentine. Their position placed them closer to the Stormlands, capital, Storm's End, making their allegiance to House Targaryen all the more remarkable. Every year, King Durandon of the Stormlands lodged fierce complaints and condemnations against House Targaryen over House Massey's disloyalty. Fortunately, both the Stormlands and House Targaryen shared a greater enemy, the Kingdom of Volantis. This mutual threat was the only thing that had prevented war. After a round of toasts and pleasantries, Aerion, head of House Targaryen, led the 4 vassal lords into the study of the Dragon Tower. As it was a formal strategy meeting, only Aegon, the designated heir, was present, Visenya and Rhaenys were not included. The 4 lords once again bowed to Aerion, who gave a slight nod in return, and everyone took their seats. A maidservant stepped forward and poured tea for Aerion first. Here, try some fresh Tyroshi tea that just arrived today, Aerion said as he handed a cup to Daemon Balerion. Daemon received it with both hands, offering a word of thanks. The other 3 lords were also served tea. Daemon waited until Aerion took a sip before gently blowing on his cup and taking a light taste himself. Laid out across the desk was a detailed map of Eastern Essos, already marked with red dots and blue crosses, red for Targaryen holdings, blue for the forces of the Kingdom of Volantis. Daemon, let's hear your assessment first, Aerion said, setting down his cup as he formally opened the meeting. As the Admiral of House Targaryen, Daemon naturally spoke first to provide his analysis of the current situation. He gave a small nod, rose to his feet, and pointed to a chain of islands stretching across the narrow sea. Ross Island is the northernmost of the Stepstones. According to our latest intelligence, the kingdom of Volantis has already taken it. Aegon followed the direction of his gesture. Ross Island lay not far from both the Stormlands and Dragonstone, a critical position. Facing the room, Demon continued, with Ross Island captured, Volantis has three likely courses of action. First, they may continue pushing into the disputed lands and strike at the closest free city, Tyrosh. Second, they could launch an assault westward on the Kingdom of Storms, attacking from the Stepstones. Third, spurred on by the Dragon Party, they may turn north and come directly for us, Dragonstone. The Kingdom of Volantis has been far too aggressive in recent decades, sighed the Lord of House Massey. His family had long suffered from Volantan naval raids, and their trade with the free cities had been crippled for nearly 50 years. Aerion also stood, tapping the tabletop with his finger as he asked in a low voice, if they continue expanding, where do you believe they'll strike next? Demon slid his finger west across the map, stopping at the Stormlands. We can rule out the Stormlands for now. Their people are fierce, their navy is no weak force, and King Argilac is a seasoned war leader. Capturing Storm's End or Tarth would be extremely difficult. That leaves just two realistic targets, Tyrosh or Dragonstone. If they choose Tyrosh, we Targaryens will certainly send troops. Our grudge against the Dragon Party of Volantis runs deep. There's a chance the Storm King might even join the campaign to prevent Volantis from establishing global dominance. And considering Volantis has already conquered 3 free cities in rapid succession, it has provoked massive backlash among the others. Moving against Tyrosh now would not be easy, it would mean facing united opposition. Aegon caught the implication and said, you're saying the kingdom of Volantis will come straight for Dragonstone. Demon nodded. Exactly. Because our house and the Dragon Party are mortal enemies. If they destroy Dragonstone, the Valentine family, the Dragon Party's leader, would become the only remaining Dragonlord house in the world. That would strengthen Volantis' claim as the rightful successor to the Freehold Empire. With Dragonstone out of the way, nothing would stand between them and Tyrosh. The Dragon Party also fears we might tame more dragons. Even now, with only Valyrian, they're already struggling to counter us. In conclusion, I firmly believe the kingdom of Volantis will make Dragonstone its next target. Aerion slowly shook his head. To think Ross Island fell in barely over a month. We had planned to launch a major joint strike on their navy with the Storm King. Now, it seems they've seized the initiative. Aegon let out a cold snort, slamming his palm down on the map over the narrow sea. Let them come, he said grimly. Valyrian's already starving. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon.com, BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 3 comments 0 vote. Chapter 55. I want both. We must take the initiative and completely annihilate the Volantis Dragon faction, uproot the Valentine family and leave not even a speck of ash behind. Aegon declared firmly. Though still young, his presence was no less commanding than that of his father, Aerion. I support Aegon's proposal. This world only needs one Dragonlord house, and the Targaryens will be the sole rulers. Househead Aerion endorsed his son's words, already beginning to pave the way for a smooth transition of power. Crispian, head of House Celtigar, was the first to voice his agreement. With a solemn expression, he said, since Prince Aegon is set on eliminating House Valentine completely, I have a rough plan in mind. Go ahead, Aegon said, sitting back down in his chair, fingers interlaced on the desk as he looked at him. Crispian, seizing the rare chance to make his mark, couldn't help feeling a surge of excitement. Since House Celtigar migrated to Westeros alongside House Targaryen, they hadn't achieved any major accomplishments. Being looked down on by House Velaryon had bruised his pride. We all came from the Valyrian Peninsula, what gives them the right to look down on us? They just happened to get a better piece of land. He adjusted his robes, stepped into the center of the group, cleared his throat, and said, considering that the kingdom of Volantis has angered the other free cities by destroying 2 of them. Why not ally with the other powers on the eastern continent of Essos and launch a joint assault on Volantis? Divide this prize among us. With Prince Aegon's Valyrian as our rallying force, and House Targaryen leading a 6-kingdom alliance, I believe our chances of forming a successful coalition are quite high. With Valyrian, the unmatched Dragonlord, on our side, why do we need to ally with other kingdoms? Questioned Bael Emon, head of House Bar Emon. Crispian shook his head and explained, sure, a dragon can kill enemy leaders and satisfy our vengeance quickly, but it only breeds hatred, and it doesn't help us seize their wealth and resources. If the enemy uses that wealth to train assassins or death squads, the Targaryens will never know peace. After all, both His Highness and the house head are still mortal men. But if we act with the support of other kingdoms, we can not only destroy their regime completely but also wreck their economy and civilian livelihood. Even if resentment remains, they won't have the means to seek revenge. Crispian is absolutely right. All military operations should aim to minimize cost. Arian nodded slightly. We hail from the Valyrian Freehold. There may yet be a chance to restore the Empire's former glory. It would be unwise to completely alienate the eastern kingdoms of Essos. Volantis was merely a colony, yet dares to call itself the heir of the Freehold Empire. We are the rightful Dragonlords. Restoring Valyria's honor is a duty we cannot shirk. Aegon was surprised to find his father still clinging to such grand ambitions. He couldn't help but mutter inwardly, we haven't even taken Westeros yet. Arian knocked on the table, the sharp sound snapping everyone's attention back to him. Tristan, go immediately and inform Storm King Argilac that next month's alliance meeting is cancelled. It will be replaced by a Six-Kingdom Alliance conference. I'll host the leaders and top advisors of the 5 remaining free cities on Dragonstone. Invite them all to attend, Arian ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. Tristan, head of House Massey, rose at once and replied, Tristan obeys your command. Crispian, stay behind and oversee communications with the other 5 free federations. Also, issue orders across all our territories, have our people prepare actively for war. If the Six-Kingdom Alliance proceeds smoothly, you'll also serve as the quartermaster for the Allied forces, Arian continued. Yes, my lord, Crispian responded with visible excitement, his eyes gleaming. At long last, House Celtigar was no longer irrelevant. Whether or not the Six-Kingdom Alliance succeeds, in 2 months we will strike Volantis and remove this thorn from our side. Even if it means unleashing Balerion to destroy the capital and forging an eternal grudge, we will not hesitate. Arian's voice was bone-chilling, laced with unwavering resolve. My lord, your will is my command, everyone replied in unison. Yes, my lord. The 2 houses of the Stormlands echoed loudly. A fervent, determined energy filled the study. Since the end of the military council held under the pretense of celebrating Aegon's dragon taming, House Targaryen's forces had burst into action like a fire ignited, swift and relentless. The ravenry atop Dragonstone had become as busy as a relay post, with ravens flying in and out almost daily, delivering letters back and forth. Crispian, head of House Celtigar and responsible for foreign correspondence, had made the stone tower of the ravenry his residence. Alongside Dragonstone's maester, he worked tirelessly day and night, writing and dispatching messages without pause. Supplies and military provisions poured in like a tide from the various territories. In the bay, the naval fleet steadily assembled, maintained in peak readiness under the rigorous drills of Admiral Demon. Meanwhile, Aegon's 2 sisters, Visenya and Rhaenys, were also making steady progress in taming their dragons. The dragons they had chosen were both fully grown, hatched from eggs brought back from the Valyrian Peninsula by the exile Aenar. Their names were Vhagar and Merixes. When the 2 sisters finally succeeded in taming their dragons and soared together over the skies of Dragonstone, the entire island erupted in celebration. House Targaryen had regained the splendor and vitality of the early years of the Century of Blood, once again becoming a house with multiple dragons. This exhilarating news made Crispian's efforts to forge alliances significantly easier. Upon hearing that House Targaryen now possessed 3 dragons, one of them even a dragon queen, the remaining 5 free cities immediately showed goodwill and expressed a desire to build friendly relations. After all, only a century ago, the 9 free cities were still Valyrian colonies. Their fear of the Dragonlords ran so deep it was like a shadow rooted in their very blood, lingering even now. These cities were only called free because they had once paid tribute, wealth and women, to the Freehold in exchange for their so-called freedom. After being enslaved by the Dragonlord houses for thousands of years, could that servile instinct really disappear in just 100? Only King Durandon of the Storm Kingdom voiced his dissatisfaction, grumbling about House Targaryen's unilateral decision to change the alliance's date and location. As they awaited the summit of the 6 kingdoms, Aegon often rode the skies above Dragonstone with his sisters, practicing dragon riding techniques. Aegon's skill in dragon riding was unrivaled in his time. If he claimed second place, no one would dare claim first. He had once ridden both Tiamat and Dreamshade. As Valyria's former champion Dragonlord, he had undergone specialized training in dragon bonding for the champion dragon battle. Under Aegon's patient instruction, Visenya and Rhaenys were quickly mastering the art themselves. The breathtaking sight of 3 dragons flying in formation frequently streaked across the skies of Dragonstone. Sometimes, Aegon would take his sisters inland to Westeros, a land he had long yearned to see. At the end of Blackwater Bay, where the Blackwater Rush flowed into the sea, Aegon caught sight of what would one day become King's Landing, now still just a tiny fishing village. After circling above the village, he followed a different branch of the river upstream and reached the Isle of Faces, where he witnessed the ongoing construction of Harrenhal. Tens of thousands of Riverlanders were being enslaved and forced to build what would become the greatest fortress in Westeros, all under the brutal hand of Blackheart, Harren. Aegon and his sisters circled above the future Harrenhal on Dragonback, terrifying the slaves below and sparking an immediate, large-scale uprising. Troops from the Iron Islands responded with swift and brutal suppression, cutting down anyone who disobeyed. Witnessing the bloody carnage, Aegon shook his head again and again. They did not press further into Westeros and instead began their return flight at once. Now, all that remained was to await the arrival of the leaders and key advisors of the 6 realms for the upcoming summit. During this time, Aegon frequently sought out Admiral Daemon, asking about military strategy and naval signaling. He worked hard to improve himself. In the past, whether hunting dragons during the dragon taming tournament or fighting in the champion dragon battle, Aegon had only ever faced single opponents or small groups. When it came to commanding large formations or coordinating multiple armies, his experience was minimal at best. On this day, in the Round Table Hall, Aegon and the house's vassals spent the entire day discussing attack strategies against Volantis. Now that he had tamed Balerion, Aegon finally had the right to claim a place at the game board. Aerion informed him of all major family affairs, sometimes even deliberately asking for his input. Aegon knew in his heart, Aerion was preparing to abdicate. After leaving the Round Table Hall, Aegon headed toward the training grounds to practice his swordsmanship. His current body was not what it once had been, he needed to recalibrate his combat skills, swordplay, archery, and more. As he reached the Dragon Wing Tower, he saw Visenya and Rhaenys in a heated standoff. Both were flushed with anger, clearly arguing about something, though Aegon didn't know exactly what. After a moment's thought, he had a good idea of what it was about. He stepped into the training yard, planted himself between them, and slowly stretched out both arms, saying, "What are you two fighting about?" The sisters stayed silent, each glaring daggers at the other. Aegon made up his mind, this pointless quarrel had to be settled. First of all, I'm not some prize to be fought over. Aegon looked from one to the other, then swiftly grabbed Visenya's hand and pulled Rhaenys' hand toward him as well. Besides, why can't I have you both? Must this really come down to a fight to the death? I don't want to share you with her. Rhaenys cried out, visibly annoyed. She's like a man. Just thinking about sharing a bed with her makes my skin crawl. I get goosebumps all over. I'm like a man. Visenya shot back, lifting her full chest proudly and casting a disdainful glance at Rhaenys'. I'm far more feminine than you. Just look where Aegon's eyes are right now. Aegon quickly looked away, coughed twice, and said seriously, let me be clear. If the two of you can't accept both being my wives, then I won't marry either of you. I could easily take a woman from House Velaryon. In fact, just earlier in the Round Table Hall, Lord Daemon of House Velaryon was enthusiastically recommending his daughter to me. You, how could you say that? Rhaenys' eyes instantly welled with tears. Visenya stared directly at Aegon, her voice stiff. Does it really have to be this way? Aegon looked at them with sincere eyes and spoke gently, I'm not joking. I truly love you both. Either we live together in harmony and everyone's happy, or we go our separate ways and each find peace. That would be best for everyone. I hate you, Rhaenys muttered, pouting as she half-heartedly pounded on Aegon's chest with her fists. Aegon took the opportunity to wrap Rhaenys gently in his arms, then reached out and pulled Visenya to his other side, embracing them both. Visenya tensed slightly, but didn't push him away. Isn't this better? This way, our family can always stay together, Aegon said with a soft smile, his eyes warm as they fell on the two of them. Visenya suddenly pushed herself free of his arms, turned to him, and said coldly, marrying us both isn't out of the question. But if you expect me to serve you alongside Rhaenys, that's never going to happen. I refuse to share a bed with a weakling. With those words, she swayed her hips and walked gracefully out of the training yard. Who's she calling a weakling? Aegon, she's gone too far, Rhaenys grumbled, full of frustration. Come on, Aegon said gently, coaxing her. That's just her being stubborn. Don't take it to heart, it's really okay. Rhaenys looked up at him, teary-eyed. Lord Demon doesn't even have a daughter, he has 2 sons. You big liar. How are you going to make it up to me? Aegon raised an eyebrow, gave her a look, and teased, what kind of compensation are you after? Don't go thinking up anything too wild. I want the first time. Give it to me, Rhaenys said, staring at him hopefully. Aegon lightly tapped her forehead and said, half laughing, we're still a long way from getting married. Stop getting ahead of yourself. Even if we're not married, ow. Aegon, if you hit me again, I won't marry you at all. See how you like getting nothing. Laughing and bickering, Aegon walked Rhaenys back to her room. His 2 sisters, one fierce as iron, the other soft as water, had never gotten along. They were always squabbling, and Aegon had always been the one to mediate between them, trying to keep the peace. After sending them off, Aegon returned to the training grounds and resumed his practice. Even with dragons on his side, personal strength still mattered. In a world ruled by cold steel, a powerful warrior commanded respect, whether from allies or enemies. The weak and inept had no chance of conquering the 7 kingdoms of Westeros. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon comp BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators thoughts. 5 comments 0 vote. Chapter 56. I want your absolute loyalty. Aegon reached for 2 training iron swords, then tossed one toward his whipping boy, Orys. This boy, who had grown up at Aegon's side, was the same age as him and possessed a natural talent for combat. In their past sparring matches, Orys could always hold his ground for quite a while. By common standards, he was already considered exceptional. The 2 took their stances, shouted aloud, and charged at each other like wild tigers. The clang of colliding iron swords rang sharply through the training yard. But it wasn't long before Orys began to falter. With a powerful strike, Aegon knocked the sword from his hand. It clattered loudly to the ground. Ancient Valyrian military swordsmanship emphasized sweeping, forceful movements. When an opponent lacked comparable strength, they were easily overpowered. Your Highness, I didn't expect your swordsmanship to improve so much. I used to be able to hold out for dozens of rounds, chubby Orys said, scratching the back of his head sheepishly. Aegon gave him a quick once-over, thinking to himself, this pudgy fellow actually has a bit of presence to him. Orys wore his thick, jet-black hair cropped short. His coarse, dark gray training uniform bore faint signs of wear from constant use. The sleeves were slightly rolled up, revealing his thick, powerful forearms. Enough. Go practice some more. Then fetch teacher Salin, I want to spar with him a bit. Aegon spoke calmly as he continued practicing his 2-handed sword strokes, adjusting his grip and balance. Orys bent to pick up his fallen sword. He stared at it for a moment, then looked up with hesitation and called out loudly, Your Highness, I actually know another sword style. Maybe it'll impress you. Aegon paused mid-swing, turned to him with interest, and smiled. Oh, let's see it, then. This boy had grown up with him, both a close companion and the one who often bore the brunt of Aegon's temper. The bond between them ran deep. Since Orys was eager to prove himself, Aegon didn't mind giving him the chance. He was about to assume power in House Targaryen, and talented, loyal people were exactly what he needed. Orys was more than suitable on both fronts. Orys nodded firmly, gripping the sword in his right hand. He then jogged over to the weapon rack, grabbed another iron sword, and returned with one in each hand. Aegon's smile froze in place the moment he saw Orys's stance. This wasn't an ordinary dual-wielding form. Orys held the left-hand sword in a reverse grip, while the right-hand sword was held forward in standard fashion. The left blade was angled low, guarding the flank. His body leaned forward slightly, like a predator ready to pounce, exuding a fierce, oppressive aura. Valyrian inverted cross dual blades. Aegon narrowed his eyes, quietly naming the style. Seeing Aegon recognize the technique, and noticing that he didn't resume his own training, Orys lit up with excitement. Grinning wide, he said, Your Highness, you really are learned. This sword style was passed down to me by my father, our family's legacy. Aegon frowned slightly, thoughts turning over. Something's off. The inverted cross dual blades was developed by Gaemon, and the manual should be locked away in House Targaryen's vault. Could Orys be Gaemon's descendant? Why does his name sound so familiar, but I just can't place it right now. He gave a small gesture, and Orys obediently approached. Aegon's smile returned as he raised a hand to lightly pat Orys on the shoulder. Not bad. That's quite the technique to have mastered. He immediately activated the chip and began scanning Orys's data. Orys Baratheon. Base stats, politics, 75, strategy, 62, military command, 81, willpower, 69, vitality, 65 90 seconds. Talents. D tier, stronghand. Your grip strength and forearm power are 125% that of the average person. True Dragonblood. The Valyrian inverted cross dual blades required significant wrist strength, and with the strong hand talent that enhanced palm and forearm power, it was no surprise Orys could handle Daemon's technique. Wait, Baratheon. Aegon's heart gave a jolt. In a flash, he realized what had been nagging at him. He couldn't recall exactly which house bore the name Baratheon, but something deep within screamed that this family name was critically important. Seems like the destiny value of this reincarnated, living saint, wasn't high enough. Some memories didn't fully carry over into this life, Aegon thought. Just then, the silver dream trace on his forehead began to heat up. His body shuddered violently, as though struck by divine insight. A surge of images flooded into his mind. Ding! You've sensed a clue tied to your past memories. Apocalypse Dream Trace talent activated. You've received glimpses of the future through foreknowledge. Flashes of imagery strobed through Aegon's mind like a flickering lantern slide. In the first, Orys was practicing the inverted cross technique under the instruction of Aegon's father, Aerion. In the second, Orys was leading a campaign to conquer the Stormlands, and founding House Baratheon at Storm's End. So Orys's dual sword technique was taught by father, he's father's bastard. Aegon exhaled softly. Good thing Daenerys's dream trace can reveal glimpses of the future, otherwise I'd be at a serious disadvantage. He tapped open Apocalypse Dream Trace again and reviewed its details carefully. Crank, Apocalypse Dream Trace. Through the dream trace on your forehead, you can randomly receive premonitions of the future. The frequency and clarity depend on your mental state. I suppose I'm halfway to being a dragon dreamer now, Aegon mused. Anyway, that family heirloom dual blade technique of yours seems awfully familiar, haha. Aegon didn't particularly care about Orys's true parentage, but he couldn't resist teasing his childhood companion. Orys opened his mouth, clearly flustered, but said nothing in the end. He likely realized he had just revealed more than he should have. Aegon turned back to the weapon rack, picked up another training sword, and assumed the stance for the inverted cross dual blades. He tilted his chin toward Orys and raised a brow. Come on then, let's keep going. Let's see whether your family's ancestral version of the inverted cross is any better than the one that actually came from mine. Orys hesitated briefly, but under Aegon's sharp gaze, his long-standing instinct to obey kicked in. Without a word, he mirrored Aegon's movements and got into position. The two dual-blade fighters launched toward each other almost simultaneously. Their footwork and movements matched as if choreographed, swords flashing in near-perfect synchrony. The essence of dual swordsmanship was speed. With two blades moving in relentless succession like a storm, the style overwhelmed defenders, forcing them onto the back foot until a gap appeared, and then, one lethal strike ended it. The clang of metal rang out through the training yard again, sharp and rhythmic like hammer blows in a forge. Orys's skill was clearly formidable. Sweat beaded on his brow as he struggled under the pressure of Aegon's flurry, but even as he staggered backward, he refused to fall. Unnoticed by them, Aerion, Lord of House Targaryen, stood silently on the balcony of the wing tower, watching the two young men with furrowed brows, lost in thought. In the yard below, Aegon had driven Orys into a corner. There was nowhere left to retreat. Just as Orys braced for defeat, Aegon abruptly eased the pace of his assault. Guiding Orys's momentum, he gently shifted their positioning back to the center of the training yard. Valyrian inverted cross dual blades, Aegon began. It originated with Daemon, one of House Targaryen's ancestors. He refined the 3 primary strikes and 12 variations of Valyrian military swordsmanship, splitting them into 6 techniques for each hand, one set for standard grip, the other for reverse. Orys. You're lucky to have learned such a powerful technique. Orys bit down on his lower lip, struggling to match Aegon's rhythm. He knew full well, Aegon was feeding him moves, correcting the flaws in his form. Aegon went on. With the right sword in normal grip, focus on slash, thrust, rake, stab, and the like. The reverse grip in the left emphasizes draw, rip, cleave, and slice. Up on the balcony, Aerion watched his son instruct his bastard brother with generosity and patience. A faint, proud smile formed on his face. Well done. Orys was just one of Aeryn's many bastards, but he was by far the most talented. For that reason, Aeryn had arranged for him to grow up at Aegon's side, fostering a bond. He was meant to become one of Aegon's most trusted companions. And now, Aegon had shown the tolerance and magnanimity of a future king, choosing not to scorn Orys's origins, but to accept him, and even pass down the essence of Targaryen swordsmanship. Back in the yard, the two boys dueled for the better part of half an hour before finally coming to a stop, both panting from the effort. Orys was gasping for air, half kneeling on the ground, both swords braced in his hands. His face was drenched with sweat, the extended sparring session had nearly drained him of strength. He looked up at Aegon, who stood with both swords slung across his shoulders. Aegon's chest rose and fell steadily, but he was clearly far from exhaustion. The setting sun bathed him in red gold light. His silver hair caught the glow, and the perfect lines of his face took on an almost divine radiance, as if touched by something holy. Aegon tossed both swords aside, crouched slightly, and extended a hand. Come on. Get up, brother. Orys stared at him in shock. He hadn't expected Aegon to acknowledge his identity, it left him speechless. After all, Aegon wasn't just heir to House Targaryen anymore. He was also a dragon rider, a tamer of a Kingtier dragon. Orys looked up, then slowly shook his head. Dropping to both knees, he raised one of his swords high over his head with both hands. Bowing his head with solemn determination, he said, "Your Highness, I am not worthy to be your brother. That would only tarnish your honor. But if you truly favor me, then let me become your sharpest blade, clearing your path and cutting down all who stand in your way." Aegon looked down at him, understanding immediately, Orys wanted to be sworn in as his bannerman. This one's clever, he thought. Strong, loyal, and quick to seize the moment. He took the raised sword and gently placed the flat of the blade on Orys's shoulder. "In the name of Vhagar, I charge you to be brave." The blade shifted from right shoulder to left. "In the name of Meraxes, I charge you to be just." Back to the right. "In the name of Melis, I charge you to protect the weak and the innocent." Then once more to the left. "Orys, my squire. I ask only one thing of you, loyalty. Absolute loyalty." Aegon kept his expression stern, his voice solemn. This was his first time officially taking a subordinate. He didn't know the exact rites, so he borrowed from the knightly traditions of Westeros, swapping the seven for the gods of old Valyria. In the end, both were constructs of belief, there was no real difference. Orys responded with reverent formality. "In the name of loyalty, I swear fealty to you, Aegon. Let the gods of old Valyria bear witness. From this day forth, I shall be known as Orys the Loyal." Aegon smiled with approval, nodded, then tossed the sword back onto the rack. Gripping Orys's shoulders firmly, he pulled him to his feet. "If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon.com, BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 4 comments 0 vote. Chapter 57, Taking the Stage in Disguise. That night, a small yet ceremonious banquet was held at Dragonstone Castle, attended by the vassal families sworn to House Targaryen. The hall was ablaze with candlelight, and the long tables were filled with all manner of exquisite dishes. The aroma of fine wine lingered in the air. Lord Aeryn, dressed in elegant black and red robes, sat at the seat of honor. His gaze swept across the hall as he slowly rose to his feet, holding in his hand the ancestral sword of House Targaryen, a symbol of glory and power, Blackfire. Under the watchful eyes of all present, Aeryn passed Blackfire to Aegon. Aegon accepted the sword with both hands and slowly unsheathed it. The Valyrian steel blade shimmered coldly in the candlelight. Blackfire's blade was long and straight, like a stream of silver, smooth and gleaming. Its hilt was even more ornate, with a lifelike dragon-shaped cross guard coiled around it. Every scale was intricately carved, clearly visible, and the dragon's eyes bulged with a sharp gleam, as if ready to spring to life. Aegon lifted the sword high, its tip pointed skyward. At this sight, the major vassals broke into applause and cheers. The thunderous sound echoed through the hall, and everyone's face was lit with joy and excitement. With the ancestral sword in hand, Aegon, though not yet formally named the new head of the house, was now able to act with that authority. "Orys, step forward," Aegon called out, smiling, his voice steady and commanding. Orys was momentarily stunned. Then his eyes widened in astonishment as he looked at Aegon. Encouraged by the approving looks and gentle prompting of the other vassals, he took a deep breath and cautiously stepped up before Aegon. At that moment, Orys seemed to understand what was about to happen. He knelt on one knee before the steps of the throne. Lowering his head, his eyes sparkled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. His hands trembled slightly. Aegon, holding the family sword with solemn composure, declared, Orys Baratheon is hereby named the third vassal of House Targaryen. Under the authority of the Targaryen sovereign, House Baratheon is formally established. Upon hearing this, Orys was overwhelmed by emotion. Baratheon had once been nothing more than a common surname belonging to a fishing family on Dragonstone. Though Orys was Aeryn's bastard, he bore his mother's name and had never imagined that one day the name Baratheon would be elevated to nobility. Thank you, my lord, I will serve you with unwavering loyalty. He said, his whole body trembling with emotion, his lips quivering as he spoke. The banquet erupted in celebration for House Baratheon. Though Orys had yet to be granted a fief, it did nothing to dampen the joy and congratulations from the others. Flushed with excitement, Orys stood, trembling slightly, clutching his wine cup tightly. As he looked around at the warm and sincere smiles, his heart swelled with gratitude. After the lively banquet, the core nobles of House Targaryen, as was their custom, gathered in the study for a council. The study was filled with the faint fragrance of tea, and flickering candlelight danced across the faces of those present. Crispian, the quartermaster, gave a slight bow and offered a suggestion to Aeryn and Aegon. Lord Aeryn, your highness, I believe we should send letters to the 7 kingdoms of Westeros, inviting them to join our alliance. Even if they won't send troops to assist us, having them send envoys would still be beneficial. Let them witness the might of the Dragonlord firsthand. That way, when we begin our campaign to conquer Westeros, we might face less resistance from the ignorant. Aeryn and Aegon sat at the head of the table. Aeryn nodded slightly, thoughtful, his fingers tapping lightly on the surface. After a moment, Aeryn gave his assent to Crispian's proposal. At that, Daemon frowned, voicing his concern. What if someone discovers a weakness in the dragon? The question was too sensitive. For a moment, everyone turned to look at him. Aeryn, the head of the house, gently set down his teacup, the light clink echoing in the quiet room. His gaze swept over them all, and he answered with a tone that allowed no doubt. Dragons have no weakness. It is the most perfect creation in the world, the most precious gift granted by the heavens to the Dragonlord bloodline. We, House Targaryen, will use the power of dragons to crush any enemy who dares challenge us. Crispian's suggestion is timely and necessary. Conquering Westeros has long been the dream of our house. After the war with the Kingdom of Volantis, we will begin the great conquest of Westeros. So during the war with the Kingdom of Volantis, we must seize as many resources as we can, to prepare for the campaign that follows. Aeryn rose to his feet, his gaze blazing. For House Targaryen, and for the great conquest, we must stand united and fight with all our strength. The vassals responded in unison, for our house, for the great conquest, we will give our lives without hesitation. After 2 long months of waiting, the footsteps of the alliance of the 6 Kingdoms summit drew ever closer. The revelation that House Targaryen had been secretly conspiring with the 6 Kingdoms to form an alliance against Volantis struck like a boulder dropped into still water, sending shockwaves through the city. Volantis's ruling parties rushed to convene a meeting. The air inside the chamber was thick with tension, like the sky just before a storm. Around the long table, triarchs from all factions sat with grim expressions. They leaned in, murmuring to each other in hushed tones, brows furrowed in worry and anger. House Targaryen's scheme is clearly meant to push us into a dead end, roared an elderly, white-haired triarch as he suddenly slammed the table. His voice trembled with fury. This was Jaehaerys Valentine, leader of the Dragon Party, head of House Valentine, and a Dragon Knight. At present, Volantis was ruled by 3 dominant parties, the Dragon Party, the Tiger Party, and the Elephant Party. We must act at once. We can't just sit here and wait to die, declared a burly Tiger Party triarch, his fists clenched. But because we were the aggressors in the last war, none of the free cities in the disputed lands are willing to ally with us now, the Elephant Party triarch sighed helplessly. Jaehaerys let out a long breath. Targaryen's move is ruthless. With so many kingdoms forming a coalition, they won't be satisfied with just a slice of land, they're aiming to wipe us out entirely. This is all your Valentine family's fault for picking a fight with the Targaryens and making them our enemy. Now they've got 3 dragons and a dragonlord. If you ask me, we might as well surrender and be done with it, the Elephant Party triarch said mockingly. Jaehaerys slammed his fist onto the table again, eyes blazing as he stared down the triarch from the Elephant Party. When we conquered Lee and Mur, when Valentine's silver dragons tore down their walls, everyone got their share of spoils, everyone feasted. But now that we're in danger, you want to sell out the dragon party. Are you trying to commit treason? That was you dragon party folks eating the meat. We of the elephant party only got the soup, the elephant party triarch muttered under his breath, not daring to meet Jehedis's gaze but refusing to back down entirely. The tiger party triarch slammed both hands on the table. Enough. This is not the time for infighting. We're in a crisis. What we need now is a solution. After intense debate, they ultimately decided to withdraw their forces to within Volantis's borders and send envoys to the Dothraki Sea. Whether the Horselords would agree to support them, however, remained uncertain. Dragonstone was shrouded in an unusual atmosphere. Tension and anticipation wove through the air of Dragonstone Castle, coiling around the nerves of everyone present. The reason was clear, a grand summit between six kingdoms was about to begin on the island, a gathering that would determine the future of the disputed lands. High-ranking envoys from the 5 free cities, along with emissaries from Westeros, were arriving one after another. When word spread that King Argilac Durrandon of the Stormlands had personally come to Dragonstone, the other envoys were stunned. The 5 free cities had all sent senior advisors, but no ruler or triarch had dared risk crossing into foreign territory themselves. Argilac Durrandon, the Storm King, was bold indeed. Upon hearing the news, Aegon went to greet the king in person. Argilac was clad in richly adorned, heavy armor. A thick beard hung from his chin, like the mane of a lion. Behind him, a contingent of elite guards followed closely, each one bearing a stern, imposing expression. When Argilac realized that it was not Aerion, the head of House Targaryen, who had come to receive him, his expression darkened at once. Feeling slighted, the Storm King was just about to erupt in a furious tirade to vent his displeasure. At that moment, a low, thunderous roar rumbled from above. Instinctively, everyone looked up. Valerion's colossal form was descending from the sky like a dark cloud. Its immense body blotted out the sun as it flew low overhead, casting a vast shadow across the ground. Under the shadow of the dragon, the gleam of the Storm King's ornate armor dulled instantly, losing all its brilliance. Staring up at the massive beast, more than 150 meters long and flying just overhead, Argilac couldn't help but swallow hard. The curse on the tip of his tongue was forcefully swallowed back down. His face turned from grim to jovial in an instant. Laughing heartily, he strode forward, threw a thick arm around Aegon's shoulders, and said in a booming voice, "House Targaryen knows how to make an impression. Sending you to welcome me. The moment I saw you, I knew I liked you, haha." Aegon watched Argilac's rugged face shift expression faster than a changing mask, and couldn't help but feel speechless. Once the 6 major factions had gathered on Dragonstone, the other kingdoms of Westeros arrived one by one, though much later. Most only sent a token number of envoys, attending more to observe the historic moment than to participate. Many were also eager to witness the Targaryen dragons in action firsthand. Among them, it was the Winterfell kingdom's move that surprised Aegon the most. Winterfell had informed House Targaryen in advance that they would send their crown prince, Torrhen Stark, to personally take part in the campaign against Volantis, seeking a share of the spoils. Curious about Torrhen, Aegon went out to meet him personally. During the reception, he learned that Torrhen had departed from White Harbor and sailed for nearly half a month before reaching Dragonstone. Notably, Torrhen brought with him a formidable force of 1,000 elite northern warriors. The Winterfell crown prince left a strong impression on Aegon. Straightforward and honest, he even reminded Aegon a little of Gaiman. While chatting casually, Torrhen laid out their intentions for bringing troops with surprising openness. "You've already revealed your hand," Aegon said with a smile, speaking to him in a friendly tone, though he couldn't help sighing inwardly. "When it comes time to face those seasoned, scheming diplomats at the alliance talks, how will you hold your own? Planning to walk away empty-handed? If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon.com, BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 3 comments 0 vote. Chapter 58, The Storm Princess. The heir prince of Winterfell, Torrhen, walked side by side with Aegon, his expression grave as he spoke of the challenges ahead. White Harbor is a vital trade hub for the Kingdom of Winterfell. Most of our goods, furs, herbs, and the like, were exported from there, and we also rely on it to import large quantities of grain each season. It's already the second autumn. Winter is surely not far off. Brother Aegon, winter is coming. The moment Aegon heard Torrhen, a Stark, utter those iconic words, a flood of memories surged within him. The silver dragon mark on his forehead began to warm faintly. He knew the apocalypse dream trace had come again. This time, there was no physical discomfort, just a vivid vision in his mind. In the vision, at the confluence of three differently colored rivers, Torrhen, clad in royal robes and wearing a crown, knelt before Aegon's adult self. He then removed the ancient crown of Winterfell and placed it carefully at Aegon's feet. Aegon hadn't expected Torrhen, the heir of Winterfell, to play such a pivotal role in the coming war of conquest. He gave the straightforward Torrhen a long look, pondering whether it was time to win him over. Aegon, are you listening? Torrhen, noticing his silence, quickly asked. Yeah, I'm listening. Aegon smiled. Where were you? Torrhen let out a heavy breath but repeated himself patiently. Winter is nearly here, and we desperately need grain. The Kingdom of Winterfell has joined your war because we hope to secure enough supplies to help our people survive the cold. Aegon gave a slight nod and looked at him. And how would you like us Targaryens to help? Torrhen's expression turned solemn. He looked Aegon in the eye and said in a deep voice. In the war against House Valentine, all military merits earned by northern warriors will be exchanged for grain. And the Kingdom of Winterfell hopes that, for the rest of this autumn, the Targaryens will waive the sea tax on grain ships bound for White Harbor. Aegon was silent for a moment. Meeting Torrhen's gaze, he said slowly. You know as well as I do, it's no easy task to distinguish grain ships from other merchant vessels. Cunning traders will always find ways to disguise their ships to avoid the tax. Besides, with all six kingdoms united, we already vastly outmatch House Valentine in military power. We're not urgently reliant on reinforcements from the other realms. The narrow sea was perpetually battered by storms. Trade between Westeros and the disputed lands beyond the sea rarely crossed directly. Instead, ships usually hug the coastline to the stepstones before attempting the crossing. Dragonstone and the Stormlands, as powerful forces along that route, imposed steep sea taxes on passing merchants. This allowed them to suppress purchase prices at White Harbor, the kingdom's largest port, while driving selling prices unreasonably high. Torrhen tensed upon hearing Aegon's reply and spoke urgently. I've brought with me 1,000 of the North's finest, battle-hardened veterans who've shed blood fighting wildlings beyond the wall. They'll be a great help to your campaign. Seeing Torrhen getting anxious, Aegon patted him lightly on the shoulder to calm him. Then, he simply pulled Torrhen into a one-armed hug and said with a grin. Listen, Torrhen. Honestly, even if you brought a few thousand more northern warriors, it wouldn't do much to solve Winterfell's urgent food shortage. But still, I, Aegon, admire a man as forthright as you. As heir to House Targaryen, the Dragonlord and Dragon Rider of this era, I'd like to call you my friend. The food crisis in your kingdom, I'll help you resolve it. Torrhen was overjoyed by Aegon's generous words. He laughed loudly, throwing an arm around Aegon's shoulders like a brother. Aegon, I knew the moment I met you, you're someone I can count on. The Kingdom of Winterfell won't forget what you've done for us, ha. Aegon smiled in return and gave Torrhen's shoulder another firm pat, his tone now solemn. My help, trading merit for grain and waiving the sea tax, it has nothing to do with the Kingdom of Winterfell. Truly, it doesn't. Torrhen's smile faded slightly. He looked at Aegon curiously. Then, Aegon met his gaze, firm and steady. It's you, Torrhen. I'm doing this for you. I just want us to be close friends. I hope this war with House Valentine brings our bond even closer. Torrhen's smile faltered as he mulled it over. Was Aegon really helping Winterfell just to become his close friend? He was a bold man, not a fool. Aegon clearly had an agenda, there was no other way to explain such a generous gesture toward someone he'd only just met. Still, Torrhen's straightforward nature kept him from overthinking it. If Aegon truly wished to be his friend, then Torrhen would treat him as a brother. But if Aegon meant harm, then the steel sword at his side was no tool for slicing bread. There was a saying in the North, don't listen to what a man says, watch what he does. That night, Aegon hosted a small banquet at Dragonstone to welcome Torrhen, inviting Orys to join them. The three young men drank and laughed long into the night. All the key lords and rulers of the six kingdoms had gathered, and most of the delegations from Westeros who had come to observe the proceedings had also arrived. The venue for the Alliance Assembly was set in the main hall of Dragonstone Castle. In the center of the hall lay a long table, surrounded by all manner of chairs arranged in a circle. Aerion, head of House Targaryen, sat upright in the seat of honor, with an additional chair placed beside him for Aegon. The Six Kingdoms referred to the 5 free cities and the Stormlands. The senior officials from each realm took their seats one after another, positioned among the guests in the hall. Argilac, king of the Stormlands, was seated at the first position to the right of the seat of honor, a placement reflecting due respect for his royal status. Aerion slowly rose to his feet, his gaze sweeping across the room as he spoke in a low, commanding voice. The wicked kingdom of Volantis has unjustly invaded its peaceful neighbors, behaving like demons, seizing the stepstones and looting merchant ships in the narrow sea like common pirates. Their atrocities are intolerable. I hereby declare the official opening of the alliance conference between the 7 kingdoms of Eastern Essos and Westeros. Today, we are gathered to discuss and draft concrete measures for a punitive war against the wicked kingdom of Volantis. This is not only a matter of upholding justice, it concerns the future and peace of each of our nations. The first item on the agenda, the interests of the allied realms. As senior envoys of your respective nations, you carry the weighty duty of conveying your monarch's will. Speak freely, state your sovereign's needs. Once all claims have been debated and confirmed, they will be written into the alliance treaty to ensure the sacred interests of each nation are fully protected. As Aerion's voice fell silent, a brief hush spread through the hall. Then, murmurs and whispers broke out, and the room gradually grew more animated. The representative from Tyrosh was the first to rise. After a slight bow to the assembly, he said, on behalf of the Archon of Tyrosh, our king wishes to gain control over some of Volantis' trade routes in the Narrow Sea as a result of this war. Not to be outdone, the envoy from Pentos stood as well. He adjusted his robes, swept his eyes across the hall, and said, we also hope that after the war, new trade regulations will be drafted jointly with the allied nations to prevent another hegemonic threat like Volantis, and to ensure fair trade for all. King Argilac of the Stormlands remained seated, his gaze stern as he addressed the hall slowly. As a key member of the 7 Kingdoms Alliance, the Storm Kingdom will commit its full strength to this war. Our demands are clear. Volantis must pay dearly for its actions. First, Volantis must pay substantial war reparations. Second, we expect to claim part of Volantis territory in Eastern Essos after the war, and Volantis must offer tribute to the Storm Kingdom to compensate for our wartime losses. Aegon stood silently at Aerion's side, occasionally handing over important maps or scrolls, occasionally leaning in to whisper quietly to his father. During this time, House Targaryen and the Storm Kingdom engaged in heated negotiations over control of the Stepstones. The Stepstones were of vital strategic importance, whoever held them controlled the throat connecting Westeros to the free cities. The power of customs control, along with the massive benefits and military leverage it brought, spoke for itself. The dispute raged on for quite some time. Whoever takes Ross Island first will control the Stepstones. Agreed. Aegon said firmly, locking eyes with the Storm King. Argilac furrowed his brow slightly, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. But after carefully weighing the pros and cons, he finally gave a slow nod. Very well. It's a deal. Behind the Storm King stood a personal guard, straight as a drawn sword. Her finely crafted helmet fit perfectly over her head, revealing only a pair of piercing blue eyes. In that moment, her gaze was locked on Aegon, who was shining at the assembly and stealing the spotlight. Her eyes sparkled with interest. After prolonged debate, all major disputes were gradually resolved. Following Aegon's suggestion to Aerion, the demands of the Winter Kingdom were smoothly written into the treaty. The Storm Kingdom also secured an enclave within Volantis' current territory, proof of Argilac's considerable ambition. With most demands now settled, the heavy atmosphere in the hall eased slightly. The focus then turned to the assembly and deployment of the coalition forces. After careful planning and tactical discussion, the 7 kingdoms agreed to gather their armies in the free city of Tyrosh. House Targaryen and the Storm Kingdom would lead as the vanguard, launching the first strike against Ross Island. As the key to the Stepstones, Ross Island held immense strategic value in the Narrow Sea. Capturing it would lay a solid foundation for the rest of the war. Once the Stepstones were secured, the Allied forces would advance together toward Volantis proper and begin a full-scale siege. With all matters concluded, the senior envoys stood, and the alliance treaties were laid out for all to see. Each representative, solemn and composed, picked up a pen and signed their name. As the final signature was placed, the hall erupted into warm applause. With the alliance terms and military strategy fully agreed upon, Aerion hosted a celebratory banquet immediately after the meeting. The following day, the envoys would depart for their homelands to begin assembling their armies in Tyrosh. Late at night, a thick curtain of darkness enveloped Dragonstone Castle. Only a few lights from the flaming dragon tower flickered stubbornly in the gloom, like scattered stars fallen to earth. Inside a guest room of the flaming dragon tower, King Argilac of the Stormlands stood alone by the window, his thoughts seemingly far away. Just then, the door creaked open softly, and his personal guard stepped in with light, soundless steps. She slowly removed her helmet, letting a cascade of glossy black hair spill down like a waterfall. Her striking, spirited features were revealed in full. She was Princess Argilla of the Storm Kingdom, Argilac's only child. Argilac looked at his daughter and sighed helplessly. You girl, why aren't you resting? Princess Argilla stepped beside her father and stood close, gazing out the window with a stubborn smile tugging at her lips. Father, have you forgotten why I came here? Argilac's brow furrowed slightly. How could I not know? You insisted on seeing that Aegon boy with your own eyes before you'd even consider the marriage alliance. Well, you've seen him now. What do you think? Princess Argilla tilted her head, her eyes sparkling as she looked into the night. A faint blush crept onto her cheeks, and the corners of her lips curved upward. Father, I saw everything Prince Aegon did today at the assembly. He spoke sharply and held himself with such composure, truly a remarkable man. Argilac nodded slowly. Yes, Aegon is certainly among the finest of his generation. There's no one more fitting to inherit the Targaryen legacy. I intend to offer your hand to him. Tell me, would you be willing? Princess Argilla lowered her head shyly and spoke in a soft voice. Father, of course I would. But I don't know how Prince Aegon sees me. Argilac gently patted her shoulder. Argilla, don't worry. You're exceptional, Aegon will surely be drawn to you. Since I've given my word, I'll see that he becomes your husband. Once I take the stepstones and offer them as your dowry, there's no way the Targaryens won't be moved. Argilla looked up, eyes full of emotion. Father, you're so good to me. I believe in you. But, the stepstones are easy to defend and hard to take, and there's that bet you made with the Targaryens. Argilac smiled with quiet confidence and interrupted her. In fact, before we even came to Dragonstone, the kingdom had already dispatched our navy toward the stepstones. If I've timed it right, they should be nearing Ross Island as we speak. Once the alliance treaty is signed today, I'll send out the Ravens. Our admiral has orders to launch a full assault on Ross Island. Don't worry, your dowry isn't going anywhere. Ha ha. He reached out and fondly ruffled her hair. Argilla nodded sweetly. Father, you really are the best. If Aegon truly becomes my husband, I'll make sure he sides with the kingdom, and helps you eliminate Blackhearted Heron, once and for all. Argilac smiled with satisfaction. Good. That's my daughter. Once this war is over, you and Aegon will be wed, and by then, the Storm Kingdom and House Targaryen will be more tightly bound than ever. He turned his eyes back to the night beyond the window, murmuring to himself. Let's hope everything goes as we've planned. Aegon, don't disappoint me. And more importantly, don't let Argilla down. Princess Argilla gently took his arm. Father, no matter what happens, I'll always stay by your side. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon.com, BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 4 comments 0 vote. Chapter 59. Your act ends, mine begins. After the alliance was concluded, the envoys from each realm rested for the night, then set out on their return journeys the following morning. House Targaryen's lord, Aerion, walked out of the main keep alongside the envoy from Tyrosh. Aegon and his sister Rhaenys followed closely behind as the group made their way to the port to see the envoys off. The massive form of the Kingtier dragon Vhagar loomed overhead, casting a vast shadow across the ground. It descended slowly and landed on the beach, where Visenya stood tall and poised atop its back, her black and red robes billowing fiercely in the sea wind. The allied Foss's temporary headquarters had been established in Tyrosh. As the initiator of the alliance, Aerion was bound for Tyrosh to oversee the command of the joint army. Since the coalition forces currently lacked dragon support, Visenya had volunteered to accompany her father. Aegon stepped forward and called out loudly, Sister, be careful on your journey. Visenya placed a hand on the hilt of the Dark Sister sword at her waist, smiled, and gave him a gentle nod. You take care too. As Aerion, Maester Gon, and the Tyroshi envoys boarded the ship, Vhagar let out a series of deep, thunderous roars. The sound startled flocks of seabirds into the air, and with a mighty beat of its wings, the great dragon kicked up a gale and soared into the sky. Aegon and Rhaenys stood silently on the shore, eyes fixed on the departing ship. At that moment, the Storm King's flagship slowly pulled away from the dock. Aegon turned his head and saw Argilac, king of the Stormlands, standing at the bow surrounded by his guards. Behind him, a tall guards woman suddenly reached up and removed her helmet. Her long black hair instantly unraveled in the sea wind, whipping around like silk dancing through the air. Aegon froze, his eyes flickering with surprise. She raised a slender hand and gracefully brushed aside the windswept strands from her forehead. Noticing Aegon's attention, Princess Argilla of the Stormlands gave a soft laugh. The corners of her lips curled into a bright smile, revealing perfect white teeth. She lifted the helmet high above her head, gave it a small wave toward Aegon, then hurled it hard in his direction. The ornate steel double-winged helmet traced a smooth arc through the air before landing in the sand at Aegon's feet. He blinked, momentarily stunned, then bent down to pick it up. But by the time he straightened and looked toward the ship again, Argilac, Argilla, and their party had already disappeared from view, leaving only the stern of the Storm Kingdom's vessel shrinking into the distance. HMPH. Rhaenys, clearly displeased, gave Aegon a sharp kick in the calf and scolded, "Brother, are you daydreaming?" Snapping out of it, Aegon gave a slightly sheepish smile and quickly shook his head. "No, just caught off guard, that's all." In his heart, he was certain, any girl riding alongside the Storm King couldn't be ordinary. After bidding farewell to the envoys of the allied realms, Aegon and Daemon threw themselves into the work of commanding the army. Time was short. They had to set sail immediately for Ross Island, the northernmost and most critical stronghold in the Stepstones. There was still a wager between House Targaryen and the Storm Kingdom. Whoever captured Ross Island first would claim dominion over the entire Stepstones. The army's departure progressed far more slowly than Aegon had anticipated. Although House Targaryen had made thorough preparations, it wasn't until the third day that the fleet finally managed to set sail for Ross Island. In truth, House Targaryen's current strength was far from overwhelming. After protracted skirmishes with the dragon party of Volantis, their naval forces had only managed to scrape together a fleet of just over 30 warships. Fortunately, House Stark had provided reinforcements, more than 10 ships, which allowed them to cobble together what appeared to be a decently sized strike fleet. Under the glow of the rising sun, the warships slipped from the port one by one. Their sails swelled full in the ocean breeze, flapping with rhythmic snaps. The oars dipped in perfect unison, churning the sea and sending up bright white splashes, the wooden hulls thudding dully with each beat. Valyrian and Merryx's circled high above the fleet, their massive forms casting great shadows as they soared across the sky, veiling part of the sunlight. Aegon rode Valyrian proudly, looking every bit the warrior prince. This was his first time marching with an army to war, and his heart was filled with both anticipation and curiosity. But that excitement soon gave way to frustration. The slow pace of the ships dragged down the momentum of the journey, and completely disrupted Valyrian's flight rhythm. Unable to bear it any longer, Aegon pressed his knees gently into Valyrian's flanks, guiding the dragon to descend alongside the flagship. He called out to Daemon. "Valyrian and I are going ahead. Rhaenys and Merryx's will continue escorting the fleet from above." Standing at the bow, Daemon raised his voice in response. "As you command, your highness." Aegon spurred Valyrian forward, soaring alone toward Ross Island. Valyrian's wings spread wide, each mighty beat sending up roaring gusts. The dragon flew at full speed, the wind shrieking past Aegon's ears, tugging at his robes and whipping his hair in wild streams behind him. Fortunately, the dragon's saddle, based on Aegon's own earlier design, was semi-enclosed, built to protect the rider at high speeds. If it weren't for this saddle, half my life would have been blown away by now, Aegon thought with a sigh of relief, running a gloved hand along the smooth saddle frame. From time to time, he glanced downward. Tiny fishing boats dotted the coastal waters below like scattered leaves, bobbing gently on the waves. But when Aegon and Valyrian reached the Stormlands, the sight before him was nothing like he expected. The port was calm. There was none of the noise, bustle, or movement typical of a departing war fleet. Even the nearby sea was still. No waves, no wake, no sign that ships had recently passed through. Aegon's brow furrowed, his eyes narrowing in thought. Did the Storm King give up the wager? Abandon the fight for the Stepstones? Impossible. Argilac is a fiery, prideful king. He'd never back down so easily. Could they have gone ahead to the Stepstones in advance? There was no time to hesitate. Aegon reached behind him and retrieved a sea buoy containing a sealed message detailing his current movements. He hurled it with force into the waters along the route the Targaryen fleet would follow. Then he urged Balerion onward, straight toward Ross Island at full speed. As dusk bathed the sky in a warm glow, Aegon flew over Tarth. Not long after, bits of shattered ships began to appear on the waves below, drifting among the swells. Aegon looked closely and spotted the sigils on the wreckage, the Stag of the Stormlands, and the sigil of House Valentine from Volantis. A major battle already happened here. He slowed Balerion's pace, gliding low to get a better view. There's no sign of dragonfire scorching these hulls, so no dragons were involved in the fight. Soon after, the largest island in the northern Stepstones, Ross Island, came into view. On the northern shore, dozens of Storm Kingdom warships had landed. Thousands of soldiers surged from the beach, charging up toward a mountain stronghold like a crashing tide. Their battle cries echoed to the heavens, and their armor gleamed faintly under the fading sunlight. Atop the fortress walls, Volantis soldiers fought with desperate resolve. Boulders were being pushed down from the fort above, tumbling down the hillside in thunderous waves, raising clouds of dust and debris that rolled like miniature landslides. Ross Island had become a scene of brutal, pitched battle, shouts and screams overlapping in a roar that shook the sky. But then Aegon noticed something off. As Balerion circled around to the southern side of the island, he spotted something startling. Behind the mountains, hidden from the main battlefield, were hundreds of warships. Their sails flapped proudly in the sea breeze, emblazoned with a golden spear piercing a red sun, Dorne's emblem, glaring brightly in the sunset. Even more concerning, a dozen or so main ships were mounted with massive ballistae, dragon-hunting crossbows. Aegon's expression darkened. His gaze fixed on the siege weapons aboard the Dornish fleet. Dorne's warships. What did Volantis offer them to get them involved? And with dragon-hunting ballistae. Dorne came prepared. This won't be easy. The Storm Kingdom soldiers, still engaged in their assault, spotted Aegon approaching on Balerion. They instantly recognized the dragon's massive and unmistakable form, one of the most powerful forces from the alliance of the Six Kingdoms. Their morale surged. Cheers and war cries erupted from the ranks. It's the Dragonlord of House Targaryen. Kill them all. But their jubilation was short-lived. From within the fortress, wave after wave of Dornish soldiers suddenly poured out like a flood. There were so many of them, easily double the number of Storm soldiers. With cold, determined faces, the Dornish fighters quickly encircled the Storm troops. Aegon hovered above on Balerion's back, watching the tides of battle shift in an instant. Now he was faced with a decision. To intervene, or not. A few days after Aegon and the fleet set sail from Dragonstone, their banners raised and sails unfurled as they slowly departed the island. At the mouth of the Blackwater Rush, one small warship after another emerged from the winding river like swift fish, streaming into the vast expanse of Blackwater Bay. On the sails of each ship was a striking emblem, a silver chain in the shape of a cross dividing the crest into 4 equal quarters. This was the heraldry of House Hoare, the so-called King of the Iron Islands, and King of the Isles and the Rivers. Each of the 4 quarters bore a distinct image, a green pine tree on a white field, a bunch of purple grapes on gold, and a black raven soaring in a blue sky. The powerful House Hoare had emblazoned their coat of arms with symbols of conquest, the longships for the Iron Islands, the pine for Bear Island, the grapes for the Arbor, and the raven for Raventry Hall, all bound together by the Ironborn's unyielding chains. Blackheart, Heron stood atop the flagship, clad in armor forged from blackened fish scales that gleamed coldly under the sun. He loomed like a demon god. Raising his warblade high with one hand, his coarse voice, raspy like a rusted gong, boomed across the deck. Pick up the pace, all of you. What are you waiting for? More than 50 longships surged forward, one after another, their hulls linked like the body of a great black serpent as they entered Blackwater Bay. Then, with a swift turn of the rudders, they aligned and paddled in unison, their oars churning white froth as they powered forward, thundering toward Dragonstone. At the bow, Heron stood tall, his hair like salt-crusted rope splayed messily across his broad forehead, loose strands whipping wildly in the sea breeze. Deep-set eyes, a crooked high nose, and a thick, unkempt beard clung to his chin like tangled seaweed dragged from the deep. Heron threw his head back and let out a strange, guttural laugh. Today, you dare join the Storm King in crushing Volantis. Tomorrow, you'll try to ride dragons to burn down my precious Harrenhal. Volantis has handed me a fine reward, now I strike first, take the lead, ga ga ga. His twisted laughter echoed across the sea, sending chills down the spines of those who heard it. Blackwater Bay lay not far from Dragonstone. Once past Driftmark, seat of House Velaryon, and into the waters of the Gullet, one could reach the sea surrounding Dragonstone. At that moment, inside the castle, an elderly handmaid named Ilya was carefully sewing a Targaryen banner bearing the three-headed dragon. Her gnarled fingers moved deftly through the fabric, but suddenly she paused, sensing something. She looked up from her work and turned toward the window. Setting down her needle and thread, Ilya slowly rose and shuffled to the window's edge, her movements unsteady. Her clouded eyes stared long and far, fixed on the direction of Blackwater Bay. After a long silence, her dry, rasping voice broke the stillness. Someone else is coming to die. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon.com, BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 6 comments 0 vote. Chapter 60, Dragonfire on the Sea. On the sloping hillside of Ross Island, soldiers of the Stormlands clashed violently with the Dornish forces charging down toward them. Esser Seldar Tarth, naval commander of the Storm Kingdom and current head of House Tarth, had already been struck by several arrows. His face, twisted in pain, turned skyward. There, above him, the dragon that had earlier flown south was now circling back. Valyrian's massive silhouette swept across the sky, blotting out the last light of the setting sun and casting a vast, ominous shadow like a dragon-shaped eclipse. Every head of House Tarth bore the title, Evenstar. Now, the Evenstar squinted up at the looming beast, lifting his left hand toward Valyrian. Surrounded and with most of his men already fallen, Esser Seldar pinned his final hope on this last, mighty savior. Above, Valyrian dove swiftly from the fading sun, streaking down toward the hillside like a descending god, a fallen demon, a mountain crashing from the heavens. In his throat, the deadly black dragonfire had already begun to gather. As he neared the slope, the black flame erupted with terrifying force. In an instant, countless Dornish and Valentine soldiers were turned to ash. The dragonfire carved a deep trench into the earth, 5 meters wide and dozens long, scorching a blackened path across the hillside. Even after the initial blast, the flames continued to burn stubbornly within the trench, hissing as they devoured everything, sending up waves of blistering heat and thick, choking smoke. Valyrian's breath bore the trait of C-class, indestructible black flame, a power that ensured the fire would never extinguish so long as even the slightest fuel remained. Clinging like a curse, the flame was as relentless as wrought on bone. From atop the fortress, over a dozen siege ballistae were suddenly wheeled forward. Each was already loaded. Behind the massive crossbows stood squads of Dornish marksmen, quickly adjusting their angles to take aim at Valyrian. Aegon had noticed their movement. This was precisely why he hadn't ordered a direct assault on the fortress. From the dragon-hunting ballistae mounted on the Dornish flagship, he had already guessed there would be more of these siege weapons in place. Charging the stronghold head-on would only invite a volley of devastating fire at close range. The moment the ballistae appeared, Aegon immediately commanded Valyrian to ascend, steering the dragon away from the island to avoid the threat. While the chance of Valyrian being shot down was slim, Aegon wasn't about to gamble on it. He had a safer plan to crush the Dornish. High above, Valyrian roared. Massive bolts, each over 2 meters long, launched from below, but they were too far to do any real harm. On the hillside below, Esser Seldar seized the opening that Valyrian's flames had torn through the enemy ranks and led the last few hundred storm warriors in a desperate breakout. Under relentless pursuit, only about 300 Stormlanders made it back to the ships on the beach. Aegon spotted their retreating ships skimming across the sea and gave a faint shake of his head, then turned Valyrian and soared toward a desolate isle within the stepstones. Evening had already set in. Aegon landed Valyrian on the island to rest and recover his strength. He ate some rations he had brought with him and rested briefly. By the time he opened his eyes again, night had fallen. He looked up at the starless, moonless sky and smiled to himself, what a perfect opportunity. Chewing slowly on a piece of cured meat, he mumbled in the direction of Ross Island. Tonight, we hunt. Rather than launching an immediate assault on the forces of Dorne and Valentine stationed on Ross Island, Aegon chose to bide his time. He waited for the darkest hour before dawn, when the sky was at its blackest and men were at their most weary. After a day of battle, the Dornish would hardly still be standing guard. By the time Aegon rose again, it was deep into the night. Dragons possessed night vision, and with the added help of his chip's infrared imaging, the darkness offered him every advantage. Mounting Valyrian, Aegon surged forward toward Ross Island, his blood racing. It would be his first time commanding a dragon in battle against human armies, and the urge to unleash fire and destruction coursed through him. Shrouded in night, Valyrian, the great black dragon, was nearly invisible, rivaling even Dreamshadow's mimicry scales and stealth. As they glided high above Ross Island, the defenders below remained oblivious. Aegon dove. From 1,000 meters above, Valyrian plummeted like a meteor, a streak of death racing toward the fortress. That dizzying freefall, the rush of weightlessness, was a sensation he hadn't felt since the champion dragon battle against Tiamat. He aimed directly for the spot where the ballistae had been stationed during the day. The siege weapons were too massive to be moved with ease. As Balerian's black fire poured down in a torrent, it struck precisely where the ballistae had been hidden beneath tarps. Flames erupted across the fortress in a sudden, violent blaze of inky black. Against the darkness, the inferno was even more terrifying, a monstrous flame devouring everything it touched. With the black fire's indestructible nature, anything flammable would be reduced to nothing. Boom! Explosions shook the air, mingled with the roar of fire and the screams of dying soldiers. Aegon rode Balerian in a sweeping assault on the stronghold's camps and structures, unleashing torrents of dragonfire. The searing flames raged as if they would reduce the entire world to cinders. Rock on the island blistered and melted under the intense heat, turning translucent like molten glass. The forests were consumed in a wildfire so fierce it lit the island ablaze from end to end. After this devastation, it was almost certain that Ross Island would become a barren wasteland, stripped of all greenery. Aegon's eyes reflected the ruin he had wrought, yet his expression remained calm, as if deep in thought. Power beyond mortals, from this day on, I will stand at the summit, he murmured to himself. He turned Balerian southward toward the bay, where dozens of Dornish warships lay anchored. Without hesitation, he dove down. One by one, the 20-meter-long warships were set alight by Balerian's black flames, going up like wax candles. For the first time, the narrow sea burned, a raging sea of black fire. The burning ships crackled and split apart. Even as wreckage splashed into the water, the flames did not die. Balerian's dragonfire continued to burn stubbornly atop the waves, undiminished by sea or spray. It was fire upon the sea. It was the wrath of a dragon. The battle for Ross Island was already over. The Dornish had nowhere left to run. With their ships in ruins and the island surrounded by unquenchable flame, there would be no escape. Even fleeing inland led only to death. It was a massacre, and a triumph. Days later. When King Argilac's reinforcements and the fleet of House Targaryen finally arrived at Ross Island, they found it scorched beyond recognition. Not a single green plant remained. At the site where the fortress once stood, Balerian reclined lazily atop the island's highest point, like a sovereign surveying his realm. Aegon, sword in hand, sat calmly astride Balerian's head, watching the arrivals from above. When Argilac and over 100 emissaries of Westerosi lords stepped ashore, they were struck dumb by what they saw. Ash and bone covered the land like snowfall. Balerian did not rest on blackened earth, but on the ashes of tens of thousands of dead. Then someone, no one knew who, muttered a single word. Black dread. A moment later, the chant erupted in waves. Black dread. Black dread. Balerian stirred at the sound. His blood-red eyes opened, glaring down at the crowd below, tiny as insects beneath his gaze. A great many soldiers trembled in fear and dropped to their knees before the dragon resting atop the field of ash. Argilac raised his eyes and met Aegon's from afar. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Aegon gave him a faint smile and said, "Lord of the Stormlands. The stepstones are mine now." Argilac said nothing. He simply nodded. Torrhen, heir of the Winter Kingdom, stared up at Aegon atop the dragon, stunned. The power he witnessed no longer seemed of mortal kind. What army, he wondered, could stand against a dragonlord hailed as the Black Death? He had no answer, only quiet relief that the Kingdom of Winter was not counted among House Targaryen's enemies. The Windworm Tower on Dragonstone pierced the clouds, and from the shrieking chamber at its peak, one could overlook the entirety of the island. Old Nan Ilia slipped inside alone. She locked the great doors behind her, then slowly walked out onto the terrace. She spread her arms wide, as if embracing the roaring sea below. Her lips parted, and a dreamlike, haunting melody flowed from her mouth, activating her ability, Skinchanger Sea Dragon. As the song echoed through the air, her once gray-green hair began to shift in color, turning emerald from the roots until it became a full mane of green, billowing in the wind. Her eyes, too, changed, her pupils vanished, and her entire gaze turned a vivid green. As the song lingered in the wind, a long, serpentine black shadow, dozens of meters in length, slowly rose from the depths of the sea, casting a dark silhouette over the surface. Old friend, it's been a long time, she thought to herself. The shadow slithered forward beneath the waves, its massive body gliding like a silent warship through the deep. With every flick of its tail, it stirred up unseen currents as it headed toward the gullet. Blackwater Bay. At this moment, Blackheart, Harren's fleet of longships was sailing into the gullet. He hadn't wasted troops attacking Driftmark. Instead, he chose to bypass House Valyrian's island entirely, heading straight for Dragonstone. To Harren, the true target was the fortress House Targaryen had spent decades constructing, especially Dragonmont. Dragonmont was his ultimate goal. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. There were those in the Iron Islands who had seen the glory of the Valyrian Freehold with their own eyes. If they waited another few decades, House Targaryen might grow strong enough to bring back the age of 100 dragons soaring through the skies. Only by destroying Dragonmont, cutting off the very roots of the Dragonlords, could Harren finally rest easy. After all, magic dragons had specific environmental needs, and finding another place as suited for raising them as Dragonmont would be no simple task for House Targaryen. When the fleet of House Hoare fully entered the gullet, a strait that grew deeper the farther it stretched into the sea, Harren finally began to feel a bit more at ease. Though they hailed from the Iron Islands, House Hoare was more accustomed to life on the water. The rivers of the Riverlands, while many, were neither wide nor deep enough to support proper warships. Even small and medium-sized longships struggled. As for the krakens bred by House Hoare, they had managed to tame a kind of octopus-like sea monster in significant numbers. But these creatures lived in the deep sea and were of little use in inland warfare. Suddenly, one of the longships let out a deafening bang and began to slowly sink. Every captain in the fleet turned to stare at Harren Blackheart in shock. Your Grace, did you bring the sea monsters with you? Why are they attacking our own ships? One captain shouted. You idiot. The Blackwater rushes fresh water. How the fuck would I get sea monsters across the continent to the strait? It's an enemy. We're under attack. Harren roared, nearly driven to stab the brainless fool on the spot. More crashes followed. 2 more longships began sinking, water pouring through the hulls below. Fuck. Get in the water and kill that damn sea monster. Harren shouted, waving his warblade in frustration. The soldiers aboard the sinking ships had no choice but to send divers down. After all, whether they went willingly or not, they'd end up in the water soon enough. Many ships had already stopped moving, drifting powerless in the gullet. Then, blood bloomed on the waves. The divers had clearly met with disaster, limbs and pieces of flesh began rising to the surface. One ironborn warrior, his body torn in half, still had a breath left in him. Struggling to raise his voice, he shouted to Harren, Dragon. It's a dragon. Harren's eyes flared with rage as he glared at the dying man. Why would there be a dragon in the sea? Answer me, you worthless dog. Sea dragon. The man gasped, then slipped under with a gurgling cry as a black shadow dragged him into the depths below. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. P. Atrian Comp. BlurryDream.